Hello, hello, chat. Hope you all are having a good evening, good day wherever you are. Everything switched over, webcam should be good to go. How's everyone doing tonight? While I check audio, see how that ends up sounding. Have to wait for the stream delay to get caught up. Oh, that's way too quiet. That hopefully should be better. Y'all can let me know if the music is too loud, too quiet as well. Hey, Wirtz. See if that's any better. Ooh, and before I forget, I should also tweet out the link. Pretend you're not here, you're at work. All right. Well, hope this is at least something good to listen to. I know you've been posting a lot of videos about Frostfall. I've been purposely waiting to watch your stuff until after I do this stream because I want to put out my first opinions, though I imagine I know a lot of your takes already. We'll see. All right, let me just quickly go tweet it out and then we can get started. And hopefully as we go, some more people will get here and chat and can throw in their own opinions, because that's kind of the unique part about doing this live is that chat can also interact. So let's see. All right. And tweeted. Smoky bad, fruit good. We'll get there. We'll definitely get there. All right, so what I'm thinking is that I'm going to just start just generally talking about the starter decks, but before moving on to the entire set list. Well, yeah, I like that a bit better. So with the starter deck discussion, I won't be discussing about the individual cards, how good or not they are, just kind of going over what I think of them as a product, and then we can get into the card review. And as you can see by the end of this video, unless this runs longer than I expected, I do have the brand new Vanguard star decks. There's 6 of them. I got one of each. I figured it'd be fun to open, just kind of discuss them. More from the not from the lens of I'm a big Vanguard fan, even though I am, but more from a lens of being able to also compare them to the Elestrals starter decks, because I have some opinions on it that I think will be very interesting to discuss in contrast. So with that, let me switch over to my main monitor, make sure, ooh, webcam's turned off here, and we're good. There we go. And I can go into full screen on this one. I think that'll look a lot cleaner. And one last check. Okay, don't need to worry about that right now. All right. So starting off here, we got the Cryo Scorch starter deck. Cryo Scorch looks really cool, of course. Big appeal with the new star decks is, of course, the 3 extra booster packs. You can start changing up your deck right away, which I really like. But kind of just going through this starter deck, the first observation I kind of made about it is that the support is a bit all over the place, at least what the cards are trying to accomplish. Cryoling, Cryover, and Cryoscorch are very much more offensive, same with Frigicub, but then we got more defensive options such as Chillatl, and Polar Acne as well. Not necessarily a bad thing, of course, it just makes it feel a bit reminiscent of the Trifernal starter deck in that regard. So for me, a positive about this deck is if you pick it up, you can learn a bunch of different strategies, facets of the game, because it does cover a lot. Though I do think it is at the, what's the word I'm looking for? At the behest? Now I'm going way too fancy there. The trade-off is that this deck, I think, lacks a bit of cohesion and will thus be more prone to, I don't want to say bricking, but it just feels a bit disjointed in what it can do as a strategy, which I do think overall hurts its ability to perform and win. But obviously that's not always the best and most important part about the starter deck, so possibly just teaching you the game, a whole bunch of different strategies of the game, I think is the most important part. Can be pretty good. Standout cards, though, I think from this starter deck, of course, the Hollow Cryoscorch, if you really like this guy. What else in here? Kione. Of course, between both star decks have it, but if you are wanting to play Frost, just being able to pick up 2 copies, I do think that this will be a crucial card for Frost. It's good. So being able to pick up 2, if you pick up 1 of each, you get your full playset and an extra one. I think that's amazing. Gorgon's Gaze is a great card here. Probably, I would say, the best card from the starter deck. And being able to have another chance to pick it up is great, 2 copies. So you pick up 2 to get your full playset, but also if you already have a Trifernal one, you can easily pick this up and get your playset anyway. And Chains of Prometheus, I think, is another standout here. Only 1 copy, but of course it's in the set, so if you do try to buy packs or booster box, you should be able to hopefully find this card, and you can always pick it up on the secondary market. But just being able to pick up 1, I think, is a phenomenal start. Tsunami also, I think, is great. This one's not that difficult to get because it was a uncommon in the main set from our base set, but at the same time, it is a great counter rune, so I think it's having another option to pick this up is never going to be bad. But I think that wraps up my thoughts on the starter deck as a whole. And I should have given this disclaimer before hopping right into it. At the end of the day, pick up whichever one looks the coolest to you, where one feels like you'll enjoy the most. If all these technical stuff I'm breaking down is all second to that. If you're just trying to pick up the game and learn it, both of these starter decks will do a good enough job at it regardless. I'm more just nitpicking technical details, so there's no risk of picking up the incorrect one. So I think that's about it for the Cryo-Scorch one. Let's go back here. Then we got the Imperawatt here. So we got a giant Flame Ice Dragon and then a giant Penguin. My brother loves penguins, so he would probably love this one. I'll have to show him it. So Imperawatt here really pulls a lot of Thunder tools to round off, since Imperawatt is Frost and Thunder. And this deck feels a bit more cohesive with Control, just like the Thunder starter deck did with Imperial. Gelato feels a lot better here. You've got the Ricerus to be able to limit your opponent's attack capabilities. Astrabat's just strong. We know all the good stuff. Electric Help find our Divine Runes. Boom Bat for destruction. Even the wind stuff is very control-oriented here. Moving down to the runes, of course, we got Shield, Divine Blessing, Thunderstorm, Tornado. Just a lot of control stuff, pretty much. So that's very much the style of this deck. I do think it will make this deck a bit harder to play effectively, but it will teach you how to get more out of your cards and when to time your tools better to have an optimal effect. That is if you are trying to play this deck correctly. But in terms of just also learning the game, it's fine. Again, it does lean more control, but if you're interested in that, it can be a great thing to learn here. As for the cards that I think are standouts from here, of course, we've got our Astrabat here. This card's just great. Any chance to pick up more copies of it will always be well appreciated. Same thing with the Elechick and Soilet for that matter. That's a good Winded Lestral. I think Picas is solid as well. Resting on your laurels, a second chance to pick, well, really third chance with Shattered Stars, but a second chance to pick it up that isn't Shattered Stars. Always welcome. 2 copies there. Keone again, I already went over with the Cryo-Scorch. Same thing here. And Divine Blessing at 1 instead of the Chains of Prometheus. I do think Chains of Prometheus is a bit better, but I can see Divine Blessing getting even better as time goes on. So just being able to get one right away, I think is great, even if it isn't for Frostfall. And then 2 Shield of Achilles is just also a solid option. Anytime you can pick up more copies of these, I think will be much appreciated. It's just a staple. I labeled it as staple for set 1. I think it's still a staple for set 2. So I think that's about it for the starter decks. Don't really have too much else to say about it. I already broke down the original 5, so I think I covered all the thoughts, kind of keeping it coherent with that. But what I was really excited to discuss is, of course, the Frostfall, just all the cards in here. So the reason I wasn't going over any cards in the starter deck as well is because all the cards that come out in Frostfall are in the main set. There's no starter deck exclusive card this time around, which is a change that I very much appreciate. I think the only time starter deck exclusives can be not, I don't want to say bad, but if you're going to make a starter deck exclusive, I think it should come in a playset. Don't make your players pick up more than 1 copy. Thank you for listening back to all. Yeah. I don't think telling your players if they want to play set, they need to pick up multiple copies of a pre-constructed deck is the best practice. I think it's better to then encourage them to go open the booster set. So great change there. Definitely, I was very, I know I was speaking that opinion out to Dan, and I'm very happy. I don't know if it was necessarily me that caused that change, but I'm happy that this change was ultimately made. But getting into the set review here, before I get into the individual Elestrals, just quick thing about the artwork here. The artwork's amazing. I absolutely love the artwork from the set. When Dan says the artwork gets better, he's not kidding. And I think Frostfall really does show it. And I'm so happy that just people that aren't the testers or staff finally get to see a lot of this artwork. Finally, you get a taste of what is the next step in it. Again, it only gets better from here. Like, look at that Locagon. This thing, I love that artwork. I don't know if I'll end up picking one up for myself. I might, but that looks amazing. And we haven't even seen all the full arts, because what we just have Glacius, a Chivalroar, Locagon, and the Flamemoth. That Flamemoth too looks amazing. And also the spirit artwork. I love all these spirit artworks. I like them better than the base set. And just because I feel like there's so much more character in these artworks. So anyway, enough about gushing the artworks. I mean, even the Stellars look amazing. So how I plan to break this down is I'm just going to go element by element reviewing each of the cards, and then I'll just kind of give a quick summary of what I think of the element and how good the support wave is at the very end of discussing all of these. Before I get in, I'm going to take a drink here because I'm probably going to go and just parch myself. So I'm going to try to remember to take sips throughout this. So starting out, we've got the Cryoling line of Cryoling, Cryovern, and Cryo Scorch. Kind of need to talk about all of these together since it is an Ascension line that does ascend into each other. Cryoling, I think, is a good card. It naturally gets bigger over the course of the game because you're naturally just going to end up with Frost Spirits in your Underworld. And so I think this really puts it as a really solid mid to late game beater. And the ability to then special send into a Cryovern, I also think is really great for pressure because Cryovern then also pressures spirit damage. And then the 7 attack base is less vulnerable into suppression than Cryoling's scaling attack, just due to how the abilities work here. So I think this as a aggressive late game push is really solid, and that makes Cryoling good. Now, Cryovern, on the other hand, I do not think it is a very good card. It is playable because of Cryoling, but in terms of its effect, I think it's too slow and too expensive. Just kind of cutting out the context of Cryoling Cryo Scorch. I'll get to that in a second. But the fact of the matter is, I do think that will hurt this card's potential, at least as a bridge into Cryo Scorch. Now, that being said, since Cryo Scorch just can end the game on the spot, that does give Cryovern some inherent strength, because once it hits the board, it does pressure that lethality if your opponent can't answer it. However, you also pose you're taking a very big risk if you actually end up using this effect to go into Cryo Scorch, because you're discarding your hand, meaning you're hoping that your opponent doesn't have a way to stop the Cryo Scorch. Like, Gorgon's Gaze is the obvious answer, but I even think in some scenarios, Tsunami will be enough to just stop the Cryo Scorch, since it can be chained to the Cryo Scorch's Rune Destruction effect. So for all those reasons, I don't think Cryovern's that great of a card, but will be played because Cryovern seems like a solid card, assuming Cryoling is played, which I think in the support wave, it definitely has some merits to it, and we'll see experimentation. Cryo Scorch, I do think, is a good card. The ability just to end the game on the spot is very strong, and even if just normal ascending into it, I think is fine. And in some regards, I think that's actually more optimal, because even if it does get Gorgon's Gazed or Tsunami'd, you do have your hand intact, so you can still try to protect your Cryo Scorch to get its effect off next turn, or at least do something. And I think that does make this card a big threat. Now, obviously, its first effect to special ascend to destroy all runes is a very strong effect, but we have to take it into the context of what can actually special ascend into that, and that's only Cryovern. So that effect is strong, but just I don't think it'll be that strong enough in practice to make up for the discard, especially since most counter runes can be chained to it. I mentioned Tsunami, but also Alter would work against this. I think Alter would also be what can stop this and make it too risky. So I expect Cryo Scorch. Maybe it might not make sense now, but I do think it is a card worth keeping an eye on moving into future sets as just a win condition for any Frost deck or any Frost Fire deck. Fire, you do need to get an extra Frost Spirit on, so I think it's more likely for Frost. So that's about it for the Ascension line. It's an interesting one. It's a mixed bag, but I think there's a lot of great stuff in there. All right. Next up is the Catarant Iwoli line. So we'll talk about these cards separately because they don't really have any connection between the two of them. Catarant is the best healing effect we have on a 1-cost so far. Just at a base level on cast, just being able to recover 2 spirits, I think is still really strong. It's not as good as, say, Sluggle or Quackle, but the fact that it's repeatable obviously it can't be as good as them on cast, but that's still a solid effect on cast, and then you have the ability to repeat that effect. Just makes this card a great recovery tool, and it's not difficult to repeat this effect as we've seen from other repeat effects. We've got plenty of Nexus Synergy. Altar of Stars is probably the best way to take advantage of Nexus Synergies right now, or at least the most versatile way to do it. And of course, I expect there to be plenty more ways in the future as well. And we've got an excess to take advantage of this in the current set. So it's one of those cards that are really for all receive effects. As long as it's a solid effect, I think it has a lot of future potential as we get more ways to push spirits on the board and move them around to trigger these effects multiple times. One thing that we really haven't gotten into with Frost is how expensive it can be. So I do think a really strong recovery tool like Catarant is a phenomenal asset for this deck overall. So I expect this card to see play now, well into the future. I think this is a great card. Iwoli is an interesting card. I think it's a decent card, but I don't expect it to see much, if any, constructed play, maybe a side deck option. The ability to just destroy all Elestrals on your opponent's board is a strong effect. I think what really holds this back is that it has to destroy an opponent's Celestial in battle to do that, meaning that your opponent has ample opportunity to stop it with counter runes. Like all counter runes stop this card. And I don't think it's necessarily worth it to go into it to nuke the board if it just gets answered. Like, you might just be better off going wide and just email to pick off one Elestral because you do that. So I do think that holds back Iwoli. Maybe as a side deck card, could potentially see play if you up against a deck that really likes to swarm the board and you know that this is your best answer to it, but I don't know if that deck really exists right now either. So keep an eye out for this card, because one day it might make sense if you really just need a way to clear out a board, but for now, I don't think it makes the cut. I think that it being on destruction is just too slow. That being said, though, I think Iwoli will be phenomenal for sealed type games, events, as well as limited events such as the ECL. Like, I read this card in an ECL context, and this actually seems pretty scary. 8 attack, and can also nuke an opponent's board in like a slow game state, potentially, where options to answer your opponent's board are limited. Next up, we've got the Emperowatt line, so Snowaddle, Pangowatt, and Emperowatt. Snowaddle, I think, is a decent card, but will not really actualize its potential this set. One thing that I've felt has been lacking for 2 and 3 costs and their viability has been accessibility and consistency, and Snowaddle does solve that for specifically Frost and Thunder Elestrals such as Pangowatt and the Rice Ridge are the only 2 in this set, and any future ones is also viable for this one, and that's really the key there. I don't think Pangowatt and Rice Ridge are good enough to see competitive play, and thus Snowaddle doesn't really have any good targets. But once we get some good ones, I think this will provide phenomenal consistency to set them up. But that being said, though, I do think that Emperowatt using Pangowatt to get into it, as well as Rice Ridge, can easily exist as a more casual locals fun style deck, especially because Snowaddle exists to give you that consistency. So I like the precedence this card sets, and I hope to see more cards like this to help search out 2 costs. As for Pangowatt, I think this is not a good card. Just like the Cryovern, it's too slow to try to get into the Emperowatt. And it also doesn't have the high attack stat that Cryovern has. Like, it's got an alright attack stat, but it doesn't have that pressure, and it also doesn't have a way to special ascend into it like Cryovern does with Cryoling. So anything that made Cryovern playable, Pangowatt just doesn't have, and has all the drawbacks of the Cryovern. Granted, it is a bit less expensive to ascend into the Emperowatt, but I don't think that ultimately really does matter. So I think it's just going to be a fun cheese card to try to get to Emperowatt. I really think we need at least a way to special ascend into this for it to have any chance of seeing play, and even then, I still think it's too slow. As for Emperowatt, this card definitely is strong. Being able to just destroy each card in your opponent's field is powerful. And even just being able to nexus all your spirits to Emperowatt and just hit for a ton of spirits, that also seems like a good use case for this card to give this card some nice flexibility. However, sorry, I got distracted by a notification. Let me just check to make sure I'm not missing anything important. Yeah, okay, we're good. Okay, as I was saying with Emperowatt, with this card though, I think where it gets held back is the same reason that Falacane is a strong card on paper, but in practice isn't very good, and hasn't seen successful play. It's seen play, but I don't think it's been successful. And that's because a majority of the counter-runes can be changed to this card. They're just more powerful than Emperowatt. So do you really want to go into this card with the goal to nuke the board just to have one of those cards you're trying to nuke get chained to this thing and just kind of shut you down? Like, Gorgon's Gaze destroys this card, especially since Unlike Cryo Scorch here, where it's to force, so the expend is not a cost as part of the effect, and Parawatt's Disenchant 3 is a cost, so you still lose out on resources. Oh, Mr. Words, he said, lack of heart removal in Cryo Scorch hurts its potential out of the box. That is true. That was a good point. That was from a bit ago. But yes, that was a great point for the Cryo Scorch starter deck. But focusing back on Imperawatt here, I just don't, until we find ways to kind of bring down the power level of those counter runes. Like, we've got ways to answer it to try to protect the Imperawatt, but is that really what we want to be doing? And the other thing for Imperawatt is, compared to Cryo Scorch, it doesn't have any of the ways to quickly ascend into it, since we don't have a way to special into the Penguatt. The Penguatt's slow to get into Imperawatt, so it's just a bit too slow to really put on a lot of pressure. So you're putting in a lot of time and resource commitment just to easily get stopped, and you don't win the game on the spot either with this card. I do think nuking the board in a lot of instances can be effectively winning the game, depending on the game state, and you do have to time it for when it's appropriate. But Cryo Scorch directly can end the game. It literally can end the game over Parawatt. So it's definitely a strong effect. I just don't think it will do much in the end. Unfortunately, I just don't see it with this card. There's too much just against this that hurts this card's viability. But who knows? Maybe in the future, if I should back up, where I think this card has the most potential in seeing play now and probably in the future, unless we again get a better Ascension line that can get this card out a bit quicker, is just a top into a Frost Thunder deck. Just hardest normal send into it to try to pressure the board that way. I think that's the best chance we have at this card being played, and in that case, it could be a pretty strong way to just swing the board, especially if you don't think your opponent's got like a Gorgon's Gaze or some scenario like that. So I wouldn't completely write this card off. I would keep it out in mind. I just, again, don't expect it to really see play. But enough rambling about that. I want to move on to the bears here, but first, quick drink of water here. And another message. Nope. All good here. All right. So moving on to the bears. This is a very much needed support wave for bears. Ursicle is a great card. Being able to just on normal cast search out any Ursa card is phenomenal. Can easily find you whatever you need to get set up. I really like this. And while it is bear specific, if we ever get generic bears, this also can be a nice searcher in really any deck just to be able to find them. So right now, great card. I'll get to the wrapping up bears at the end here, because really what I have to say more about Ursicle is really true for all bears. Urskoat is the only bear here that is, I shouldn't say is the only one. Glaciers is technically generic, but this is not a bears related one cost despite being a bear. Because when it's attacked during the damage step, you can return the attacking Elestrals to its owner's hand, even if it is destroyed. Really cool effect. What I think really holds back this card is unfortunately that it gives complete agency to the opponent. You have no agency. Like, I compared this to Foamy when I was thinking about what I thought about this card, and the big difference I see with Foamy is you can attack into something to initiate its effect. Urskoat, you can't do that. So the opponent's not going to attack into it until they're ready to deal with it, and even then, they might just say, to get out 2 Elestrals, they might be fine just letting one bounce back to hand. So while it does stall, I think you're still better off just making more proactive plays, or plays that are better at disrupting the opponent. I just don't think this is good enough for that reason. I don't even think this will be really running bears. I think there's just better things bears can do. Abominursa, on the other hand, is a good card for bears. I would say it's a decent card. I think it's good right now, but decent in the future. Scaling up for every other bear by 2 attacks is strong. If you have another bear out on board, which is not too difficult, we got plenty of ways to swarm the board with bears, it becomes a 5 attacker. That's good, and it only gets better from there. The reason I say it's decent is because I do think that its only effect being an attack gain, dependent on building out your board wide, isn't going to... I don't think it will be... Attacking, I think, is one of the weaker effects, and will be, as we get stronger and stronger effects, will be generally one of the weaker effects. That's the reason why I don't think that this will have a lot of longevity. I think it will be a decent beater for long term, but I think we're really looking for bears to do more stuff than just get out a big beater after swarming the board. So for right now, just great payoff, definitely needed, but I definitely think bears will be looking for more in the future than just Abominursa. Now, Glacier Ursa is a new 3-cost, and it's got a very aggressive effect. 14 attack, dealing piercing damage, which is exactly like Yu-Gi-Oh!, where even if a Elestral's in defense position, they still take spirit damage, and then suppressing that Elestral is just a nice utility effect. Now, I think this effect would make more sense on a 1 or a 2 cost than a 3 cost. I think it's just a bit too weak for a 3 cost overall. And it just means that all the value in this Glacier Ursa is baked into it getting off a successful attack. If it gets answered, you spent all these resources just to get it out without really gaining anything, which I think is the most unfortunate part for this card. So for bears, though, I think it's fine. We'll get to what really helps you get this out and why I think it's good for bears as a really strong aggressive tool, because if your opponent doesn't have an answer, it's going to wreak havoc. There's a recording I don't think Dan ever released where he got out of Glacier Set. I forgot it suppressed and he attacked over my foamy, and I was very sad. That was not a fun game for me. But in terms of just longevity, I think it really... I'll get to that overall with bears, but I don't think it really has the longevity that bears needs to be able to put up at least competitive results, but really fun deck. So I'm going to cheat here. I know I said I was going to cover all the element cards, but I'm going to cover a primary fire card in Ursa's Den. It is part frost because it's relevant for bears. So it gives each of your Ursa Elestrals +1 attack and +1 defense, or each of Ursa Elestrals, so it can be both yours and your opponent's. When a player casts an Ursa Elestral, you can enchant a spirit to this Ursa's Den, and then you can disenchant 4 from this Ursa's Den in order to special cast an Ursa Elestral from your hand or deck. So this is not restricted to 1 or 3 cost. This is our way to cheat out our Majursa and Glacier set. Though I do think that Glacier set is a bit better because it already commands so many resources. Just go in, try to get the advantage ASAP. And I mean, that's strong, be able to turbo out a 4 cost, and it's not that difficult to set up for spirits. That's literally just a Ursmog, special cast 1, and you've got it. So that definitely... My conclusion with bears is it makes the deck playable, unlike the previous iteration where it's more just spinning its wheels, not really getting anywhere. It's an interesting tech to kind of swarm the board in other decks, but really as its own thing wasn't doing much. It is very much playable now with this second support wave, and it pairs nicely with those previous Ursa Elestrals because they help make the deck more consistent to get into stuff like your Abomin Ursa and just set up your Ursa's Den. However, I just don't think it's got the stuff to be competitively viable. I think the payoffs are definitely a lot weaker than a lot of other decks, but that's fine. There always needs to be fun decks, and I think this is going to be a really fun deck overall. So that's about it for bears. So getting into this next, I'll play this ice cube melt first. So getting into these next cards here, we got Tadflow, the ice or frost form. Gosh, I watched the one Kodak video. I'm just saying ice now. The frost nexus form of Tadpuff here, and like Tadpuff, it is support for getting into your 2 cost quicker. So by expanding a frost spirit, you can special spend this Tadflow into a 1 frost or 2 frost from your hand. So a great way to just easily get into it. Though, unlike Tadpuff, this card does not have the flexibility of being able to, if it gets Gorgon's Gaze or can stop from being ascended upon. Right now it's just Gorgon's Gaze. You cannot follow it with a 1 cost. So this one definitely is not as good as Tadpuff here. If you get Gorgon's Gaze, you're completely shut down for the turn. But still, nonetheless, just more ways to be able to get into your 2 cost quicker has potential. Right now, I don't think it's good enough, mainly because I don't think the 2 costs are good enough right now in Frost to be able to warrant it. But once we get some better ones and also more consistency in finding them, I think that's the big thing. Because right now we can search out our Panguat and Riceridge, and well, I already went over Panguat, and let me tell you, Riceridge has a much easier way to special send. So, but it definitely has future potential, but it being easily punished also does hurt it. So it'll be interesting to see. I do expect to see experimentation though if someone's trying to make a Ascension strategy work though. Will it be good enough? I have my reservations, but still, I'm happy that this card exists for Frost to enable those strategies. Its Ascension form, Permafrog, here is a viable option, but I don't think it's that great of a card. So Elestrals cannot attack unless they're Fire and Frost enchanted, and during your opponent's end phase, you must either expend a Frost or destroy this Permafrog. So it's a Floodgate effect. And that's a scary effect, but what are you stalling for right now? My problem is you could say, oh, I'm stalling for Cryoscorch, but if you're not pushing damage, you're not getting your opponent down to the 5 spirits to be able to set that up. And you're on a clock as well, so you need something to do there. I just don't think that's there yet. And on top of that, this is pretty easy to run over, even just misenchanting it. Like, I don't think it's that difficult to deal with, though I think that's fine. I think Permafrog suffers from the unfortunate situation of wanting to introduce a floodgate style effect like this because it's very thematic, but not wanting to be busted because that's no fun to play against. So it definitely, I think, has potentially some fun play. I'm sure someone will try to make it work and it will be great, but definitely not competitively viable at all, nor should it be, in my opinion. Frostmite is the Frost Nexus for Warmite, and appropriately is the antithesis of it by being able to target an opponent's Celestial and give it -5 defense until the end phase. Really cool effect. I don't think it's super relevant though, because most Celestials are played in attack position right now. Maybe once we get a more defensive deck, this might see some play. But I really expect it to be more of a side deck option than anything else. I definitely don't think it's as good as Warmite can be. So it's decent, good tech card. This is another card that I think has a lot of interesting potential in more limited formats such as Sealed or the ECL as well, when these more rogue, more defensive strategies or just throwing something in defense can be more relevant, or your card pool's just limiting you need out to defensive bodies. This Ascension Polar Acne here is an interesting card, though I think I would just say is decent. So it gives all your opponent's Celestials -2 attack, so it can be super noxious and hard to attack over. You can also expend a Frost in order to target and destroy an Elestral with 2 attack or less, so it can help clear up some boards as well. That being said, though, it can easily get outed by counter runes, just any sort of removal, and doesn't put on enough immediate pressure alone for, I think, it to be relevant. I do think that with maybe some extra support, maybe some rune support, this could be interesting, but I don't think it'll be anything more than just like a fun locals deck. And again, I think that's fine for this card. Scary effect though, this is another one kind of like Permafrog, where that -2 attack could be super noxious to kind of hit over this and can just really drag out the game. So, oh, that's what I was going to say. It's like, there's a thought just kind of nagging me at the back of my head. If we get more ways to drop stats, this can be a really interesting removal option to slow down the game and just kind of start picking off pieces. So I do think it has some potential, but again, I don't think it's competitive potential. I do think at a base, it is a bit too weak for that. Now, let's get another drink before I move on to Morfrost, because I got a lot to say about these Morfrost guys. And if you're joining us a bit late, welcome. I am just kind of reviewing all the Frostfall cards. Feel free to pop in chat. Feel free to sound off and chat about your own opinions on these cards. So, Morfrost here. This is looking to be the most consistent strategy in Elestrals to date. I expect this to see heavy experimentation for the meta, and even if it isn't the best deck, I expect it to be a rogue deck at worst. It's got, I think, everything it needs to just be a deck, and probably the best Frost deck as well. Morfrost Lycan form lets us search out 2 non-Lycan form Elestrals by pretty much being a Thunder Dragon, expend a Frost and discard this Morfrost. So that's great consistency right there. Indus lets us expend a Spirit to be able to send 2 Morfrost from your deck to your Underworld. That's Underworld set, which is relevant for this deck. And because Frost has ways to toolbox back those Elestrals from the Underworld to hand, it just gives you more easy access. You don't have to draw them. And this is just an annoying guy, being able to destroy a face down rune if it's destroyed in battle. Like, do you really want to use your suppress tools or your removal effects on this guy when you know bigger, scarier stuff is coming? But you also don't want to give up a rune. So I think this is a solid Elestral as well. Abominals are a big payoff here, being able to gain +1 attack for each Morfrost or Underworld, just a big attacker, just trying to run over stuff. And if you ever get extra spirits on it through maybe like Nexus with an altar, just being able to disenchant it from this Morfrost Abominable to go wide is strong, because going wide is definitely better than going tall right now. So phenomenal payoff here. I know I said with the what is it called? The Abominursa, how attack gain I definitely think is a weaker effect, and that deck will need a better payoff in the future. I do think that's also somewhat true with Morfrost, though with the added consistency, I do think that this will make this more relevant moving forward. This one's just so much easier to set up, and it's also, I think the condition to achieve that attacking is a lot easier than being able to set up multiple Ursas on board. You just need them in Underworld, which the deck naturally does. So this one I think definitely is a lot better in that regard. And then finally Terror here. I think this is a nice cherry on top to the board, not our main way to win the game. It just helps secure the board and make it even harder to deal with, by giving your opponent's Elestrals -1 attack for each Frost Spirit and enchanting this Morfrost. That's just obnoxious to deal with. And if your opponent tries to target your Morfrost, you can discard Morfrost to negate and destroy that card, which pretty much just means that they're probably not going to do that unless they are desperate and have 2 ways to target and probably remove your Morfrosts. So they're just trying to get the 1 Morfrost out of your hand and then push it after that. So that's a really strong effect. But again, if you don't have the board established, I don't think this card is that amazing. Sure, you're protecting itself to try to build out wide, which is decent, but I do think it's just going to be better if you have like an Abominable on board and now you want to make it even more difficult to deal with. So just really, really good package overall. I feel like it has everything it needs at a base to compete. So definitely expect to see a lot of Morfrost. Everyone going to be making that Morfrost joke. So move away from Morfrost, we got Frigicub here, our Nexuser. So Frigicub, unfortunately, was a bit better before the Nexus rule changed before the original release. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, it used to be that Nexus was a compound effect, so what you could do with Frigicub was Nexus the spirit off of Frigicub, and then it wouldn't go to the underworld in between the Nexus and the when you do, so you'd be able to enchant it with the spirit back from the underworld and keep it on board. However, that is no longer true, because once you Nexus that spirit off, after that Nexus happens, Frigicub would be sent to the underworld and field clean up before its when you do effect would be added to the chain. That being said, though, being able to accelerate spirits from your underworld back onto field is strong. And specifically on this offensive card, because you have flexibility with it. It can be used to pressure the opponent with more spirit damage, or to siphon off to cast, invoke, and counter runes, just really efficiently using your resources here. So, and with the higher attack stat, just does push it into more that offensive role for that flexibility. So I think this is a decent card. I do definitely think it's a very low output Nexus, though definitely one that can snowball if unanswered pretty well. So I think it's decent for right now if you want to utilize some Nexus energies in Frost, but I definitely think it's going to be one of the weakest Nexus strategies in the game currently. Though of note, you can always Nexus to counter it to recover too, so you've kind of recovered 3 spirits, which is pretty cool. But again, I think that's not the strongest that Nexus can offer in elements though. Shiver its Ascension though, is probably our best Frost 2 cost in the set. Because it's got 7 attack, that's great. Can enchant a Frost Spirit from your underworld to the Elestrals for free just once per turn. That's recovery, again, can be used to push more spirit damage. I think that's super solid. And if you have Mounts of Boreas, Shiver cannot be targeted by your opponent's runes, meaning that it is a lot harder to deal with, like specifically Tsunami, Shield, Alter. Shield's the only hard answer to this one. So it's just more obnoxious to deal with, which I think is really good. And then if you have Mounts of Boreas, it really does support this enchant spirits to board, because it's like your standard stadium just giving stuff attacks. So just being able to bolster stuff. So really Shiver would be a 10 attack 2 cost, which is really strong. And that pairs well with Frigicub as well, just being able to get extra spirits on board to bump up its attack. So I like that effect. Do I think it's going to make a meta deck? No, I don't think it's strong enough to be a meta deck, but I think it'll be a fun option to try out. I really think Morfrost is going to be the way to go for Frost meta, but I do think that you can make some really fun Frost decks utilizing Shiver as a more top-end way to finish it off, even if it's just more on the good end of a locals deck. Arcturus here is a big attacker, being able to expend a Frost gain 3 attack and do that up to twice per turn. You can get this 1 cost up to 9 attack. I don't think this is good. My reason being is you have to give up 2 spirits to get it up to that 9 attack, to then still have to attack over something and just run into all sorts of counter runes. It's just more efficient to use a removal card at that point. So I get the idea of using this guy to get spirits in your underworld to set up the Cryling a bit quicker. I just don't think that's good. I think you can pace out the game because you'll naturally get to your Cryling anyway. So maybe just as a expend 1, get to 6 attack. But again, I just think there are better ways to accomplish that, more cost-effective ways than to make this guy useful. So fortunately, I don't think Arcturus will really see much of any play. Chill Auto we already know from the Kickstarter is one of the promos there, but I'll still go over it again. Being able to lock down 2 face-down runes as long as Chill Auto is cast is a cool effect, and I think gives this some niche potential, but nothing more than that. I think it would be interesting if you have a board set up and then you can get this Chill Auto out, because it just says on cast, doesn't say normal cast, to just lock down the back row, or even just lock down the back row and then go for a big play. That has some potential. It does require the deck to be able to set up, or at least protect the Chill Auto for a turn, and that's the big tall ask. And I don't think there's anything that's really big enough to really justify trying to do that. but I think it's still a viable option to keep in the back of your mind as you're designing decks, because I do think that this could come up as a neat tech option at some point. 2 more, at least Celestial Frost cards. Let's see if I can get through this. I say, see if I get through this. I'm going to get through this. All right. And Frostix here. This is a really cool effect. Spend 2 Frost, discard this card to special cast a 1-cost Frost from your Underworld. This is a very strong effect, especially since it can cast any 1-cost Frost Elestral, meaning that you can, it works pretty much, I think it's a better Tadflow, honestly. Sure, it's a cheaper Tadflow, but it's a better one. Because you can pair this with any Frost Elestral, cast out the Chillolatl to lock down those runes. I mean, of course, they can chain it, but then you still got your normal cast. I think the best pairing here is the Catarant, because you can just refund its cost right away. And then from there, you swarm the board, so you set yourself up for multiple bodies for Nexus energies. You can also set up Ascensions, which is really strong. Oh. I don't know if his words is behind or this is just coming through very slowly on my end, but back to the Imperawatt. And we can discuss the Imperawatt here. He said its bridge effect is also antithetical to Emperor, and that is true. You're getting rid of a spirit on board, but your Imperawatt needs spirits on board to Nexus to it to be able to fuel it. So that's a very good effect point as well. Frostbeards will be fun and interesting. I hope so. I definitely see a big beaters style deck being the best one other than more Frost to build out here. Frost Zoo is going to be interesting, yeah. I'll get to my thoughts on Frost as a whole at the very end of it here, because I'll kind of touch on some of that. But yeah, I think Frost is strong just because it opens the deck up to a lot of synergies. It pairs well with being able to send stuff to Underworld, or at least recur your Elestrals from Underworld for powerful effects. So I expect this card to see play. It's not really, I mean, it is an Elestral, but it isn't. It feels more like a rune. But the cool thing about Frostix is because it discards itself for cost, you can special cast itself out. So honestly, for all purposes, it really is just a more expensive, but I think a better Tadflow, because it just provides you more flexibility overall. Finally, Morlith here. I'm surprised it took us this long to get to a self-mill card, because that is a theme of Frost here. So this is the first of the Lith cards being able to be normal cast if a condition is met. In this case, your opponent has to have fewer Elestrals in an Underworld than you do. But if you're playing a mill deck, that naturally should be happening here. And it's really an extender, because when it's cast, you can mill the top 5 cards of your deck. And that's really, for a self-mill deck, I think that's a very strong effect. You get a big beater out here that pressures both a high attack stat and spirit damage, and you get to further extend your Underworld to be able to use for various synergies. I think the big thing that just holds this card back right now, because I think it's a very good card, but I think what holds this card back here is we just don't really have many more ways to start milling. And the mill option, which I'll get to in a second, doesn't, I think, synergize the best with Morlith, because it's more luck-based. And we don't have many payoffs, or really any payoffs, for self-mill right now. I think that's really lacking. We've got some resource manipulation, but I don't think that is good enough right now to really tie together this self-mill strategy. But watch out for Morlith once we do get more support for that, because I think this will be a very, very strong card. Moving over to the runes, Kione, I'll open this up because it's a bit hard to read. Kione here is a very strong card for recurring resources, since you can disenchant a Frost to return a 1-cost Frost Spear, or 1-cost Frost Elestral from your Underworld to your hand. You're naturally going to get those Frosts back into your Underworld, and just through the course of the game, and it just means that, one, you can tailor back specific ones if it's better for the situation, and it's a lot harder for you to brick on no Elestrals, which I really, really like. It also opens up the synergies based off of the effects. I can think of an easy one right now, and Frostix. Loop back in Frostix, get the special cast, extend from there. That seems very, very strong. So a good Divine Rune overall for Frost, I definitely think is one of the more powerful ones. Scepter of Kione is an interesting card. Doesn't quite give as many stats as the Scythe of Demeter, but 2 attack, 1 defense is solid. And being able to special cast a 1-cost Frost from hand if you destroy an Elestral in battle is just extra extension. However, I do think that this is a bit too slow, and you have to commit so much just to kind of get it off, and Frost just has more efficient ways to swarm the board. Again, there's only 4 slots, so I do think that it can get pretty easy for a board to get clogged up as well. So I don't know if it's really worth it for this card here. Though I will say it pairs nicely with Kione, because Kione can supply you the Elestral hand, which is nice. But again, I just think it, like in Frostix, better way to try to swarm the board here. Avalanche is that self-mill starter. Actually, before I start with Avalanche, let me check chat. I saw a message. As far as I haven't We haven't called a 5-guy zoo, to be honest. It's TCG standard good stuff, creature pile nomenclature. That is very true. It really is 5 guys. It really is zoo. I'll have to keep that in mind moving forward when I'm classifying decks for the tournament. Good call out there. Avalanche is our mill card for Frost, and let's just break it down first. Each person sends the top 3 cards of their deck to their underworld. If you control a Frost Enchanted Celestial, send an additional 2. So it supports both self-mill and opponent mill. And as for self-mill, similar to Morlith, I just don't think that self-mill deck has the payoffs to warrant it, and also this card isn't searchable. So ideally this would be your starter, but you can't really guarantee it, and there's no other starters right now in the deck. So I definitely think that hurts this card. And on top of like the main synergy right now with Morlith, since this is a linear mill, that means there's a chance your opponent won't have fewer Elestrals in Underworld. They could mill 3 and you could mill 0, and well, you're not getting out your Morlith. And on top of that, I think this is more of a minor issue and more has to do with the support we currently have. Only being able to mill an additional 2 if you have a Frost Enchanted Celestial in your Underworld kind of limits some of the toolbox capabilities, resource capabilities of this deck, because you might want to mill first and then start making your plays. Maybe you want to loop back an Celestial you mill with Kione, maybe do something with Enfrostix. Maybe you just want to set up a turn 2 Morlith, for example. And this card just doesn't do that effectively. Now, once we get more support in this self-mill package, this probably will end up being fine. I think that final point is kind of moot. It won't be as important as just getting cards into your Underworld. But in terms of opponent mill potential, this pairs phenomenally with Humbust. Mill rune to trigger Humbust's ability, perfect. So I expect that's where this card will see play, definitely at 3 copies. Go into the zoo. Yup. Hey, if we see a 5 guys resurgence with some Frost stuff, maybe. Though no Frost 5 attackers currently, so maybe not. So then we got the standard Stain Mounted Boreas, not much to say, just super solid. I will say this does look a bit better in Frost because we have cards that specifically interact with getting spirits back on board, and that does lend this to be able to give more attack gain, just generally more synergy overall. But that is it for the Frost cards. My opinion on Frost, it is a solid first showing. We've got a lot of powerful cards, interesting concepts to explore. This both supports Frost as a new archetype, or main, not even archetype, but as the new element, but also does support older decks, which is nice. So there's a bit of everything in here for everyone, it feels like. But on the flip side, I also think that works to this element, to the detriment of this element a little bit, because it feels like it's being pulled in a bunch of different directions, and though not to the same extent as fire, because there is some cohesion between all these elements, thankfully. Just it means that some strategies end up looking way more appealing than others, and others just really need more support, like self-mill. And the final point I'd say what I really like about Frost compared to the other months is it feels like it really has a identity to it. If someone asks me what is Frost about, I can say Underworld, which is really refreshing to say because I do feel like the other elements, at least from the first set, do lack that. But that is my review of Frost, the longest one that'll take me. Like I've already been live for 52 minutes now. So hopefully the rest of these will be a bit quicker. Yeah, for sure. It definitely is missing that WinCon Grave Shift. And which is sad because I love the concept. Like we've got a starter, we've got an extender, we've got plenty of ways to utilize those resources in your Underworld. Just it's missing that payoff and just more ways to tie it together. And I cannot wait till we get that stuff, hopefully soon, because I would love to play a deck like that. I was playing, if anyone here plays Yu-Gi-Oh, Tier Limits. I was playing that Master. That was a lot of fun. Though hopefully this won't be as broken as Tier Elements. Yeah, Earth's Coat could, but at the same time, it gives your opponent complete agency, which I think really hurts that card. And your opponent, the difference between that and Shield is your opponent knows that it's there, versus Shield where they don't necessarily know it's there. That's true, where Wind does have at least a good identity with Toolbox, as well as using life at the cost of diversity. That was a good point. So I do take that back. Wind this is probably the second one with I think it is a bit of a clearer identity than Wind, but Wind definitely has a pretty strong identity as well. We'll get into Wind later here. So one more sip and then we'll move on to Earth. I'll try to move this through this a bit quicker. All right. So moving on to Earth here, we start with Paleoth. And I will fully admit I've got a personal bias to this card because I really like this effect. And I did have some hand in it getting to this final stage here where it's at. Okay, cool. So Paleoth here, when it's just destroyed by power by card effect, you can search your deck for 2 Earth Elestrals with the same name, send 1 to Underworld, and add 1 to hand. So this is generic support to help search out 2 and 3 costs, just giving those extra consistency in Earth. Where this feels a bit counterintuitive, though, is you need bodies on board to make this work, to ascend into, but Paleoth has to be destroyed to get those to hand. So that definitely hurts its viability a little bit, but where I do think it gains additional viability is that it does send one of them to Underworld, which can trigger some Underworld synergies. So there's a lot of moving pieces with this card that can lead to it snowballing into the case of where the output is greater than the sum of its parts, which I think we'll be waiting for that payoff. But for now, though, also another note, we can see this right away with Gigaflora being able to special on the top of a Giraflora. That also helps here since you can find your Ascension to be able to quickly get into it as well, which I really like. So Paleoth, I definitely think is a card to keep an eye out on. I think it has potential to be really strong, just probably not this set. Though it is a fun enabler, I think, for Gigaflora is where it will shine. I came up with the pitch to add 1 to the Underworld, then hand, and with it, and came up with the pitch to add 1 to Underworld, then hand. Oh, that's what you're saying. Yes, that's a great suggestion there. Neander Sloth, though its Ascension form, I think is a bad card. I'm going to be frank. It's a bad card. So when it destroys an opponent's last one value, you can just force your opponent to discard 2 cards from hand. At that point, I mean, sure, like either the hand will already be depleted and your opponent will already mobilize some of the cards they want, or they've just kind of been conserving resources, in which case a discard 2, yes, it's going to be effective, but if they already say on that main cards, they probably have plenty of responses, and you've already committed so much into this Neander Sloth. And then having Titanostock and Underworlds get plus attack, that's not worth it with what Titanostock is. I don't even think it'll be worth it if we get a new Titanostock. Just don't see this card being worth it. It's going to be funny. Like, I'd love to see someone make this thing do something, but I don't think it has any competitive potential. It's just kind of a funny card. One of the Paleoth, one of the coolest side, I agree. And it makes me feel so bad for Neander Sloth just being what it is. I don't know. Maybe there's some Neander Sloth lover out there who can make it work. Then moving over to Cyanectar, we can talk about Cyanectar and Wasp Ivy together. And for that reason, I'm actually going to talk about Wasp Ivy first. So 8 attack is unaffected by your opponent's counter runes if it ascended from a Cyanectar, and when it's destroyed in battle, your opponent expends 3. This card is strong. Being immune to counter runes means it can get immediate value off, and having that force the opponent to expend 3 when destroyed in battle just makes it even more obnoxious to deal with. It just means stuff like Sorlet is not an ideal out. You really need to find like that Earthquake or resting on your laurels to deal with it. But the question is, how consistently can you ascend this over Cyanectar? So we do have ways to measure with Paleoth, but again, that's a bit slow. But Cyanectar, thankfully, can special send into it when specifically Poison Tipped Arrow, Poison Nectar, and Poison Tunic is cast. So that does also give this extra flexibility. And the nice thing is you don't need to ascend into Wasp Ivy off a Cyanectar's effect to get the counter rune immunity. If Cyanectar, say, gets Gorgon's Gaze when it tries to special ascend, as long as you've got a Wasp Ivy in hand, you can normal ascend into it and you're good to go. And I do think that lends a lot of potential to this card to be playable, because it is a strong payoff. It's just a matter of, can you set this up consistently enough to work? And even if it is a bit more on the inconsistent side, that's such a strong payoff, it might even just be worth it. I think it might be worth it. But the big thing for Cyanectar that I think will make or break this is how easily can you find and use Poison Tipped Arrow, Poison Nectar, and Poison Tunic. So we know Poison Tipped Arrow, that's a great card. Everyone's playing Elestrals, you're going to get a chance to cast it. Poison Nectar is in the set, we'll review that in a second. Poison Tunic is not in the set, so some of this card's potential lies in a future set when Poison Tunic is printed. But going over to Poison Nectar here, it is a generic counter rune for 1 cost that can only be cast when your opponent activates the effect that draws a card. You negate that effect and destroy that card. I'll go over this card specifically when I get to the generic runes, but in terms of usage for Cyanectar, this is too niche. Your opponent usually is searching cards over drawing cards from effects. Like there's very limited cards that actually draw cards, especially cards that see play. And then specifically for those happen at specific points in the game. So finding your Poison Nectar and getting that to line up with when your opponent draws cards is a tall ask. And as such, this card I don't think lends much, really helps out Cyanectar at all. It only helps out against certain decks, such as a more like Aphros focused draw deck. But other than that, I don't think it really helps at all. So only having one good generic target and Poison Tipped Arrow really does limit what the consistency of this deck. And you know, that might be for the best, because that's a really strong payoff. But still, I think this does have some potential to see some experimentation in existing Earth decks. Maybe Earth Beatdown might want to tech in a 1/1 line of this to see if it ever lines up. But other than that, it might also just be a decent rogue strategy to build around some Earth decks. So we'll see with Poison, if once we see Poison Tunic, if it can be more readily cast than Poison Nectar, that makes this package here way more consistent and probably way better. So definitely watch out for these two cards. I do think that these have potential here. Next up, I'm going to skip over Giraflora because we already know what it does from the Centaur Star deck, but Gigaflora, being able to expend an Earth to special send from Giraflora into Gigaflora is strong, helps ramp into it, and it is a slower body, but being able to special cast a 1-cost Earth for Elestral from your Underworld is also really strong because you can just start swarming the board. It's not part of your normal cast. The big thing though is it is slow, but I am happy it can special send over Giraflora because then I think it would be too slow. So the fact that it can do that, if you can protect it for a turn and start swarming the board, I think does give this card some potential. I just don't think it's good enough for competitive play, but I think we'll make a really solid locals deck, just try to swarm the board that way. I expect to have more to say about this card. That's pretty much about it. Panzer is one of the creative cards, and it's a really interesting card, getting +1 defense for Earth Spirit on it. And then you can Nexus up to 2, so it's another Nexuser. And when you do, you can return an Earth from your Underworld to your Spirit deck or enchant it to this Panzer. So it's a way to recover spirits passively or just get it back on this body. And honestly, this feels kind of funny compared to the Frigicub because this feels a bit more flexible than the Frigicub, but it is more locked into that defensive role than offensive role, hence why I think it could be more flexible. And just as another Nexus, I think its main application is just as another Nexuser. And it's got a decent effect on top of that. So it's just a matter of, do you want the 3 Nexuses or the 2 Nexusers, so up to 6 copies, or just more than just standard 3? And I can see right now, I don't know if a deck really wants, like there's an Earth Nexus deck that really wants that, but if we start getting more receivers for Earth and just want to build like a big Nexus deck, I think this card definitely has potential there. So I think it is a decent card, though I do think Equal Links is better for the role of a Nexuser for the deck. To make a search for this. Gotcha. All right. Mostation here, I think, is a legitimately good card. Getting 2 attack for each enchanting Earth Spirit means a 6 attack by default, and even just 4 base is decent. And then, of course, during the end phase, much change it to defense, which I think it's not amazing. It definitely makes it so that you need ways to protect it, but ideally you want to protect it anyway because you want to build up multiple Elestrals on board anyway. So I think this has a pretty natural inclusion into Earth Beatdown. And what I really like with this card is this has phenomenal synergy with Altar of Stars. That is the fact that you can, well, I should say this does exist in Earth Beatdown with the other Earth Beater cards, but this one scales a bit quicker. And where I also like this card is that it's more independently high. It can get to higher attack independent of other cards, unlike Tektoros, which is just a nice use case for this card. So I definitely expect to see experimentation in deck. I think it's natural. It's a natural inclusion. Again, that altar play, just being able to switch it back to attack, get an extra Earth Spirit. It's at 8 attack, can do 2 spirits worth of, or has 2 spirits on it to deal some spirit damage. Looks strong. Gigaflora, Bag of Winds, checkmate. Hey, and especially with some of the other cards we have here, Chains and Divine Blessing to help protect it. Yeah, that sounds like a really, really fun deck. Another creative card here is Cyprong, and this is passive recovery, being able to return Earth Spirits from your Elestrals when they're destroyed in battle, as long as Cyprong is in attack. I'm going to be honest, I don't think this is a good card. I understand that it is you unique combination of abilities right now, since it's more offensive as well as recovery, but I just don't think it does either of those well enough. I think you're better off if you want recovery, going with your stronger recovery options. I think some of them do actually fit in more aggressive decks thanks to Demeter. And in terms of offense Celestial, it really is just the 4 attacks. So I just don't think this is worth it. I think you have better things to run than Cyprong, which is unfortunate because this is a creative card, and I do like the design of the card. The artwork looks amazing, and I get the idea behind the effect. I just think it's a bit too weak, personally. Now, a better recovery card here is the Verdalith, the next Lith here. And its cast condition is your opponent has to have 4 or more spirits in their spirit deck than you do, so you can easily play it from behind. And then when you cast it, you can return 4 Earth spirits from your underworld to your spirit deck. So just a great way to cover spirits, get a big body on board. It is more defensive, but I think that is for the best because that is a lot of recovery on this card. But I also like the fact that it's just on cast, so you can just ascend into it like you normally would and get the recover for anyway. And I think that's perfectly fine because that's a lot of recovery here. So as we get more defensive Earth decks, I think this will be a natural inclusion. The only deck I can think of right now that probably would like to experiment with it is maybe Fruit. If you just need to stall a bit longer to dig for your Lotigan or even your Ambrosias, you can just kind of go into it, recover some spirits, and buy yourself more time. But I also could see the deck not really needing it because you already have a lot of recovery anyway, as we'll get with the Earth Rune of this set. But all in all, I think this is a decent card. I definitely say keep this in mind when building out Earth decks. Again, I just think that the more offensive decks are better right now, so there really isn't a clear home for this one yet. Moving over to the one Earth Rune, right? Yep. I mean, the stadiums are reprinted, but I don't need to go over them. But we got Ambrosia Cornucopia. So I completely glossed over the title cards with the more Frost. Cool mechanic here, but Ambrosia Cornucopia definitely is a good utilization of this mechanic here. This, I don't know if mechanic's the right word for it, feature of a card. So another Ambrosia mean can trigger Lotigan, it can trigger Drataya, and its own effect for 2 Earth is draw a card and return any number of spirits from your underworld to your spirit deck up to the number of Ambrosia in your underworld. That is a strong effect. That pairs very nicely. Sure, if you have no Ambrosias in your underworld, it's just it's a worse Nectar of the Gods, but considering you're most likely pairing it with a Drataya or a Lotigan, that's fine. And it only gets better from there. So just such an extra Ambrosia for Fruit, I think, is exactly what it needed. And honestly, it's got scary attrition capabilities now. So I'm really happy for that deck, and I definitely say watch out for it. I don't think it will be meta, but I do think it will be possibly rogue contention because it is a lot of recovery. It is a lot of card draw. I do think it probably will just be prone to bricking is going to be the main issue that it will run into. So good card, though I don't think you would run it in anything outside of a deck that's running the Fruit package. So you will definitely be running those Dratayas and those other Ambrosias. So Earth for this set, I think, got some really nice stuff to just elevate what it was already doing, as well as some interesting cards such as like Paleoth and, of course, Wasp Ivy to be explored later. Just kind of more packages to build out what Earth's capabilities are. So I'm really happy with this support wave, though I will say I am missing I mean, it is doubling down on the beaters, but it still feels a bit all over the place. So if someone were to ask me what Earth does, just say beatdown right now, but also has some other stuff. So it does have some identities being built out, but it is lacking, I think, some cohesion, but not in necessarily a bad way, because I do think the cards work pretty well together. And of course, you got Words in your Fruit best deck. Hey, Words, bring it to one of the tournaments once you're allowed to play in Frostfall. I want to see it perform. Some of beers would be pretty awesome. I understand the idea of putting Cyprong in Earth Beaters just for some passive recovery, but honestly, if I were had to choose between casting out Cyprong and literally any other Elestral that they've been playing in Earth Beatdown, I would rather cast the other Elestral because it just puts out more offensive pressure. That's my take. That's true. You can run drops. That's a good call out. Grave Shift. You can run left to shuffle back in your cornucopias to get them 4 Ambrosias. I don't know if that's necessary because I think it's pretty easy to find your Drataya, and as long as you got a Drataya, I think it's fine. But maybe like a one of drops isn't the craziest thing because it also lets you run more Lotigan, but also be able to shuffle those back in if you find those early and aren't ready to build up to it yet. So I don't think it's completely unfounded. But that's about it for Earth. Moving over to Fire, this is going to be a fun review here. I know you mentioned something which kind of alluded to it earlier on. So let's start out with Smokey. On special cast, draw 2. This is a strong effect. it won't see play. I don't think there's enough ways to consistently set this up for a special cast, and as a normal cast, it is terrible. So, like, Rise from the Ashes, you need to get this in Underworld anyway. How are you doing that consistently without bending over backwards to do it? Just for a draw 2 isn't worth it. I feel like if there's a fire deck that could more natively just special cast out Elestrals, just kind of built in, Smoky would be a lot better. But right now, it's just too hard to set it up, and I don't think those ways makes it worth it. But I do think it does have potential. I could see this being an interesting reload tool if we get like a hyper aggressive fire deck that does have some special casting capabilities. Like Smoky worst card. I feel like this card has potential. It just just doesn't fit with the support wave right now. Now, Capricorn can special cast it out and gains 2 attack for each Firelash on board, and that's an interesting effect, but it's just, I think, a bit too slow. You can't really search out the pieces anyway, so that's my gripe with this card. It's a decent card. I think for sealed formats, it can be especially good, but in terms of constructed play, I think there's just more consistent things to do. It's not a bad effect, but I don't think it's a very outstanding effect overall. Komagma here, another receiver that is a more generic than the Cinder from last set, which really helps out Fire. Komagma for attack can draw a card, then discard a card. So it is a way you can start funneling stuff into your Underworld, but the biggest asterisk, okay, yeah. But back to Komagma here. Draw a card, then discard a card. So that's a way to start loading up your Underworld with stuff. That's nice. Kind of start filtering through your deck. For attack is decent. But I think the problem right now is Elestrals, I've noticed, is a game where if you're running a card, you intend to play it. You aren't really running too many tech options to out certain matchups because there isn't enough variety in what decks do right now that you really need to tech specific options to out specific stuff. So if you're running a card, most likely you're playing it. So that makes Komagma a bit awkward when trying to discard a card. On top of that, there really isn't too many direct discard synergies with Fire right now. I feel like Komagma's really missing that. And once we get more, I think Komagma really just needs more discard synergies for it to start seeing play. And at that point, it will be a decent card. I don't think it'll be anything crazy, but I do think it will be a nice enabler for stuff. Limited potential right now, the worst card in the game, Rip Smoky. Yeah, agreed. Reanimator back on the menu. All right. Next up, we got Exalt Flare here. Being able to Nexus 2 to special send Exalt Flare into a 1 fire or 2 fire from hand. So great way to just ramp into 2-cost Elestrals. What I think really hurts this card is just consistency. We can find Exalt Flare, but we don't have any way to find the fire 2 costs. So we have to naturally draw into it, which means likely we're running more bricks. On top of that, this is really a 3-card combo in hand because then you need a Nexus Bank. And I definitely think that really hurts this card. There's a lot of setup to be able to do stuff, so you can't really use it more aggressively. And I don't think Fire really has enough explosive 2 costs right now to really warrant that setup. You really want to get into those, it feels like you want to get into those 2 costs as efficiently as possible and just try to hit fast right now. But if we get more combo 2 costs that are more explosive, I think Exalt Flare is a bit better. Or if we can just set up the Nexus into a 2 cost a bit more consistently, that's where I think Exalt Flare does have potential. So maybe in a future set. Next up, Lavalith. It's so funny because we're saying Smoky's the worst card in the set. We go straight to the best card in the set in Lavalith. So it's the Lith, so it can be normal cast out. The condition is if your opponent has 2 more spirits than you do. That's easy condition to meet because Elestrals is a constant back and forth. And when you cast it, you just target and destroy a rune. So one of the likely ways that your opponent will have 2 more spirits is if they have the Divine out. And you can just pop that. Get rid of those spirits. Easy. That's a huge tempo swing. On top of just being a phenomenal attacker at 6 attack for 2 spirits. And is also flexible because you can just ascend into it as well and pop a rune if you need to. Not as ideal, but you can easily do that if you're ahead and you just need to get a rune off a board. So this card is very flexible, very strong, and notably, the only thing it requires is Fire Spirits, so it can, as long as you're willing to commit Fire Spirits to your Spirit deck, you can run this in any deck. And I think that gives this a lot of potential, and I expect this to be one of the most played, at least one of the most experimented cards in Frostfall. So watch out this card. I think this will be good for a very long time. So much potential was Spire Burn, or Frostfire Underworld synergy. Oh, for Komagma? Yes, but again, I don't think that's... You can naturally set up the Underworld. Like, I think for the Frost stuff, again, we're missing the cards that really synergize with getting sent to Underworld, being discarded. Everything that we have right now, you naturally get to it over the course of the game anyway. So it definitely has potential in the future for that reason. And then for Exalt Flare, I'm assuming you're talking about with Waspire Burn. Yes, that is definitely scary, but I just don't see it yet. I'm going to be honest. I definitely think it has scary potential, though, if we find ways to just super load up on Waspire. But right now, it's just not consistent. I don't think we have enough ways to just load it up with spirits. And especially since it's a 3-card combo with Waspire, you really want to load it up and just burn your opponent for a ton, not really wait for your opponent to set up the... let me back up. Sorry. I don't think... You don't want to be finding ways to help your Waspire survive. You want to be finding ways to just end the game right then and there. So, yeah, do keep an eye out for that. White Flame was going to go Burr. Hey, I haven't gotten to Flame Moth yet. I'm covering that under the wind section. But moving over to the fire runes, we got 2. Stoke the Forge. If Volcanic Forge is enchanted, you can search your deck for 1-cost Fire Elestral and add it to hand. That's a really simple, easy search card. I do think that Volcanic Forge synergy is better than Hephaestus synergy right now, so I think that naturally fits into what Fire's trying to do, and that's just a really good effect to be able to search out any 1-cost Fire. Really great consistency. I don't think this really brings together a mono Fire deck in a highly playable fashion. I still think Fire is lacking a lot, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. I already covered Ursa's Den, so I'm not going to cover it again here, but Chains of Prometheus, a 2-cost counter rune, and another, I think, really strong card from the set, one of the best cards of the set. So it can be chained to an opponent's counter rune and negate that rune, and your opponent returns 1 spirit from their underworld to your spirit deck. And that's just to prevent a huge spirit swing off of this one with like shields expending and whatnot. And that's a really strong effect. Counter runes are very powerful right now, so having a way to just stop them, I think, is very strong. Though I will say, I think this card should not have been able to be chained to itself, because it can do that right now. Or I shouldn't say that. I think that let me put my words together a bit better here. I see it potentially being frustrating that chains can be counter to chains, because the idea is your opponent casts a counter rune and you can stop it to still get off your play, just reinforcing your tempo swing, but it is a bit expensive and your opponent does get back a spirit. However, your opponent then be able to chains your chains just kind of puts you in a chains war. If anyone plays Master Duel, I could see that as like the Maxi mini game with chains, though probably not as consistent. So it definitely is strong. I think it will definitely see experimentation. It'll see play if decks want to run Fire Spirits, though I will say I don't know if it's evergreen enough to just see play in every single deck. I could see possibly decks being able to play it in this set, having the leverage over other decks, but I could also see just trying to commit those Fire Spirits not being good enough, and you'd rather just accept if your counter rune gets answered and whatnot, or just try to play through your opponent's runes more effectively. But this card definitely helps enable, I think, a lot of more bold strategies, go big strategies, because you do have that natural protection here, which is very, very nice. I think it really helps Ascensions in particular here. Let's see. Silver with Waspire potential early burn. Blue player counter war. Go. Yeah. So this is definitely a good card. I will be curious to see where it lands, if people end up playing it. Are the best decks the ones that can play it? Or, like, I have a ton of questions for this card, which don't have a confident opinion on. What I am confident on is this card will see experimentation. So overall, 4 fire for this set. I think it has some of the best cards in the set. It has the best card in the set, so that is a plus to it. But I don't think it does really enough to carve out fire as its own deck. It's still pulled in so many different directions, but I do like that this is more consistent with what it supports. Sure, it's got some bad cards, but at least here it is more just generic cards that can be generically thrown into fire, which I really do appreciate. So I hope we continue to see this for fire and just add more stuff that's just better. Maybe kind of get some of these, just gonna put it, make it more cohesive, because this definitely isn't, it's more cohesive than set 1, but I don't think it's quite as cohesive as it needed to be to get the deck up and running. All right, moving on to water here. We start with Dratagua, and this is another card I'm going to be super biased about because I love Aphros, I love water, and Dratagua is the perfect pair for Aphros. It's just like Catarant. When it receives a water spirit, return 2 water spirits from your underworld to your spirit deck. the best recovery effect on 1 cost right now. It's got 4 defense, which pairs beautifully with Galaxy to make it a decent attacker. It's just everything I could have hoped for. I shouldn't say everything I could have hoped for in a receiver. Obviously, just when it receives a Water Spirit win the game would be the best option. But in terms of just good receivers to pair with the Nexusers, phenomenal. I absolutely love this card. I think this is great to build out more water stall, water attrition stuff. Just gives water a very solid foundation. I think one of the most solid foundations of any Nexus strategy right now. Lagagon is the Ascension form of it, and be able to gain +1 attack for each Water Spirit in your Underworld is nice, and then whenever you return a Water Spirit for your Underworld to your Spirit deck, you target and destroy a card. So just turning any of your recovery into targeted removal is very, very strong. I also like that it's a 2 cost with a high defense stat, meaning it pairs a lot nicer with Galaxy, but also getting attack means we don't need the Galaxy for it to put on some offensive pressure. So it's just a really strong card. I don't think it's like amazing where you'll be splashing 3 of this in a deck, but I still think this is super solid. I could see water decks running this as maybe a one of as a top end if they need some extra removal on like Elestral to out stuff, maybe like a side deck option. So I definitely expect to see experimentation with water, and I'll get to that at the end of this review. Moving on to Corbel here. So when this casts, your opponent must remove each face down card in field and destroy each non-counter rune revealed this way. So punishing your opponent from bluffing. And I know this card seems very scary with Spark It Hand Rip, but I don't think this is a very good card. I think that's like the only case where it seems super scary, and even then you really need it to line up. If your opponent doesn't set the bluffs, then Corbel is just a dead cast. Do you really want to risk it? Do you really want to run this random water card in your Thunder deck, or do you just want to, like, how much do you actually want to lean into the Thunder Nexus stuff? I think you're just better off sticking with what Thunder Nexus is already doing and just getting the Spark It Hand Rip anyway. If your opponent sets bluffs, well, that's on them. I mean, I think there's other ways you can punch it, such as running like a Thunderstorm right now. Korra, or actually, I was thinking about this. I saw a pop-up in the last tournament, so yesterday's tournament, where people are starting to combine Thunder Nexus and Earth Nexus together. And even in that deck, that's a great way to punish the opponent from bluffing, because you can just go Equalinks Nexus, pop it anyway. And I think that's way more efficient. That's way better. But moving on to Korra here. So this one gains +1 defense for each face down card in your rune row. So it gets big with your face down cards. And when this card is in defense, your opponent cannot set cards. So I think this is a bad card. I understand the idea behind this, but you need to get it out before the opponent has a chance to set cards, and that's when it would be strong. But since it's a 2 cost, you can't really do that. And to be fair, I think that would be very frustrating to deal with if it could do that, so probably for the best. But at the same time, it just means I just don't see this card really seeing play. Maybe if we had a Heavy Storm in the game, that would be interesting. But we don't, so that's about it for this card. Narpoon, I really should have discussed with Frost, because it's 4 attack on normal cast searcher, 1 cost Frost, and add to hand. Great searcher. I think it's one of the best searchers for any element because of that 4 attack, meaning it can put up some offensive pressure. So it's not really a water card, it's a Frost card, and it's a solid one at that. I think it will see some play and has the potential to see play in the future, just to be able to make your Frost strategies more consistent. I'm with you on that one, Graveshift. I'm so happy. I'm actually, you can't see under here, but I'm wearing my Watercaster shirt, but it's cold, so I'm keeping up. But you can see the Leviathan see Leviathan on my shirt. Big water fan. All right. Whale Lance is the next one here. So Water Frost Ascension. When this Whale Lance destroys an opponent's Celestial battle, you can search that player's deck for any number of cards with the same name as that Celestial and send them to the Underworld. I think this has potential, but it's not good right now. They defend, 8 attack is solid, but I don't think being able to get rid of all the Elestrals the same name from your opponent's deck is going to be super relevant right now, especially with how slow it is. And sure, I think the obvious thought is that you get rid of all your opponent's Warfrosts, but that just fuels the deck. Like, I just don't see that being good. You just tell your opponent, hey, you now have all your Morfrost in your Underworld, your Abominable's big, you can easily recur it with stuff like Kione and Frostix. So for that, I don't use that as a counter. But where I think it has potential is as we get more titles across different Elestrals, if we do get more titles. Because if we do, that means that Whale Lance can start sniping if a deck runs, say, let's just say Astrabbit and Astrabbit the Thunderleap, or whatever funny name it gets. Just being able to snipe all those out of deck and get rid of a ton of viable Elestrals, make it hard for your opponent to find them, I think is super solid. But definitely have to be careful because if your opponent likes the Underworld, Whale Lance is not going to be that great. Though also in sealed play, I think this has some potential as well. It's just a solid attack stat, and being able to get rid of some of your opponent's crucial Elestrals in a very limited format seems pretty strong. Next up, we got Babloon here, and then it's got a simple effect. Water Enchanted Elestrals get +2 attack and +2 defense. So that includes itself, so it comes in as a 3/4, which is alright stat line. I'll be honest, this feels very out of place because really it's just a great way to bolster your board once you have it built out, which maybe with a Water Stall deck, sure, but we've got Galaxy. That's just way better. Like, Babloon's just way better. Not Babloon, Galaxy's just way better than Babloon. So it just feels very out of place in water. I feel like it would be better serviced in, like, fire, honestly. Like, just throw out a bunch of Ignectors next turn to cast the fire version of Babloon, and you just buff them all up. I don't know. I don't think this card will really ever see play. I just don't think it really matches up with what Water's doing. Maybe Water could build out a deck that can help it, but I'm not banking on it, honestly. Maybe I'm being super biased for it. I just don't really like this card. I think it's very boring on top of that. Moving over to the water runes, the one we have here is Rise from the Depths, a 1-cost Rise from the Ashes for 1 Spirit Water Elestrals. You just need Atlantis to be cast. That is a very strong effect. And it's sort of like an Enfrostix as well, cheaper as well. So you get great synergy. You can cast out what you want, cast out a Dratagua, recover too, even better. Then start setting up additional Nexus synergies, Ascension synergies. Definitely has a lot of potential there. But I think the problem with this, I see with this card, is potentially deck space. Water is more stally, so it really feels like it wants those counter runes, especially, I would say, argue even more so than a lot of the existing decks, on top of wanting its removal cards. And then if you're running like the Nexus core, you want the Poseidon, you want the Trident as well. I think, well, maybe not the Trident, definitely the Poseidon, but the Trident. So I think it's just kind of the struggle of competing for deck slots. So I just don't think water decks right now, since especially I love running Trident and Poseidon, it really likes that. I completely forgot to mention that Dratagua. Dratagua also pairs great with Poseidon. Just Nexus 1 to it, return 2, awesome. But I just struggle to see finding deck space for Rise from the Depths as well as Atlantis, because if you're running Rise from the Depths, you need to run Atlantis, and you really want to be able to find it consistently, or this is a dead card in hand. So I think that's going to cause Water to struggle. I think Water will need a deck built out that really doesn't need Poseidon and Trident and really prefers the special cast off of that. But even then, if it's, my first thought is maybe a more offensive archetype that really likes Atlantis. I think that's something who needs to like Atlantis. But even then, do you really want to give up Trident? I don't know. I really think that the deck will need to give elsewhere to make space for this card. So really strong card. Definitely keep an eye out for this card. I just don't know if it quite makes the cut right now. I don't know if what it does and the setup required is worth it compared to what Water can already do. So, see Babloon, my boy. It's adorable. I'll give you that. It is adorable. My issue is very much with the effect. I hope that if we ever see a future Babloon card, Babloon, the Bubbler, I don't know, that it has a more interesting effect, because that is adorable. So my conclusion to Water is I'm heavily biased, and I think this is a great support wave because Dratagua and Bakugan, but in reality, I think it's a decent support wave. It gives Water really what it needed to round out that solid Nexus core, a great Ascension, but everything else is kind of lackluster. It also gives a power card for the future, which is nice, but it definitely has a lot of lackluster cards as well, which I think brings it down. But hey, all I'm going to say is, to wrap this up, is I'm just happy that with just the 2 cards that feel like they fit in perfectly with the deck, I'm happy with that. Before I get into Thunder, since we're almost done with this, thank you all for hopping in here. I'm very happy with all the interaction that I've been seeing, you all sharing your opinions. I think it really adds to this discussion overall. And I'll be honest, I was worried that I really wouldn't have many viewers interacting in the stream, making it a bit awkward feeling. Because the whole reason I did this instead of making this a video was just time constraint. It's a lot easier right now for me just to hop on a stream when I have time than try to film a video and then edit it. So I really appreciate you all being here. I've had fun doing this so far. All right, but moving into Thunder here, we've got Funglow and Brontiglow, a cool Thunderstorm synergy card. So Earth Enchanters get +1 attack, and when a player casts Thunderstorm, you can special cast a Brontiglow from your hand or deck. So that's pretty cool. Buffs up their Brontiglow. Brontiglow can disenchant a Thunder from your Funglow in order to suppress each Elestral on your opponent's field until the end phase, and when this Brontiglow destroys an Elestral in battle, you can special cast a Funglow from your Underworld. So I think that these cards are all right. I don't think they're anything exceptional, but they're not bad either. Fun Glow helping you get out the Bronta Glow. Popping a rune also really helps since you're casting Thunderstorm. And then Bronta Glow, being able to bring back out your Fun Glows to storm the board is kind of nice. And, you know, the Fun Glows do give your Thunder Elestrals +1 attack, meaning they hit better numbers. And I do think the Specify is just a neat utility effect. But overall, I do think that this is a bit lower output. We don't have any ways currently to search out Thunder Elestrals or Thunderstorm, which I do think hurts the viability of this archetype. So I do think it will need that. But even then, this still might just be a bit too weak of an output, but we'll see. It definitely is a neat effect, and I like the concept here, and I hope it is further explored. But Balloon is the goodest boy. Leave him alone. All right, I'll leave him alone. Oh, I just realized what happened here. Is that what happened? I see what happened here, guys. So if I seem delayed in responding to your comments, it's because the bottom comment, based on how the chat box was set up, it wasn't showing it. The only reason that was because the top of that laughing emoji was appearing up by the enter chat message here. So that explains why words specifically, it felt like your messages were coming in very late. It's because they weren't moving up until you responded to the next thing. All right, Fun Module will glow up when Thunderstorm gets titles. Yeah, that will definitely help it. That's for sure. I still worry that they're a bit too low output, but nonetheless, just getting a titled Thunderstorm, like how Drataya got a titled Ambrosia, I think will make this a very playable, fun deck at worst. And I love seeing that. I do think that there is a very important space for fun decks in any game. Moving right along, I'll skip over Rice Rose because we already know what that does. Bump, bump. Hey, I can see them now, words. But Rice Ridge here, I've been mentioning it because it's a Thunder Frost Elestral, and it has the same ascension effect as Gigaflora does. Expend a Frost to ascend Rice Ridge into this Rice Ridge, get it out a bit quicker. And when an Elestral that is not Thunder Enchanted declares an attack, you can expend Thunder in order to negate that attack. Really cool effect to protect your Elestrals from attacks. Really forces your opponent to have other answers to it. Unfortunately, those other answers are in abundance, so you'll need other ways to protect the Rice Ridge. But if you can find your other, like Chains of Prometheus, for example. Excuse me. Marketplace Teamer. Oh, that's true. But if you can support this with other cards to help protect it, I can see this being a decent like stall tool to try to bridge up into 3 costs. Right now, we really only have Imperawatt, and that actually intrigues me, using Rice Ridge to kind of protect, stall off the opponent to then ascend into the Imperawatt to just kind of nuke the board. That seems like a lot of fun. So I think this is a decent card. I don't think it's any meta material, but I do think that it's decent enough to definitely see play, and I think will be an interesting card to test and just kind of see what potential it has. If you ever get any other Thunder Frost or Frost Thunder, this could be a decent way to bridge up into it as well. Especially if we can get a way to maybe cheat out like a Rice Rose, then Rice Rose you immediately get up to 3 costs, which is pretty cool. Next up, we got Platypulse here. Elestrals are not Thunder Enchanted, get -1 attack for each Thunder on your field. The effect of Elestrals named Platypulse cannot be reduced in Elestrals attack by more than 4 total. So this is an interesting effect. Just kind of bringing down all those attack stats, making it easier to attack over, harder for your opponent to attack over your stuff. Unfortunately, I feel like this needs to be, you either need to be able to swarm this out onto the board or just back it up with something else for it to really feel good. Like, it's just a really weak Elestral on its own. Like, I don't think just casting out is really good enough. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad card, but I don't think it's a great card either. It's an adorable card, but I don't know if a deck will ever really love what it does. Maybe as a attack option, though. Again, cute card, though. It's kind of... I don't think it's as boring to me as Balloon. Like, I actually think it's quite an interesting effect, but I definitely think it is lacking in ways to truly utilize this effect in ways that really make sense. At least, I should say more from a competitive perspective. From a permanent perspective, do whatever you want. That card can lead to some fun plays. But finally, we've got this rune here, Race to the Top. If Mount Olympus is enchanted, you can target 2 Elestrals and destroy the one with the least defense. So this is rune or Elestral removal in Thunder. So, and it's an interesting one on top of that. Finally, to win the best element in the game. Not yet, still covering the rune here, but almost. So this is good. Like, Thunder can search on Mount Olympus, and then you've got a cheaper Earthquake. and you definitely have easy ways to lower Elestral's defenses, or just you've got Ash Rabbit, which is a big booty on its own, making this, I think, a good card. Now, will it make sense in the meta decks over Earthquake? I think that depends on, do you want to commit the slots to Mount Olympus and Jolton, or do you find it's just better to commit to other stuff and just keep running Earthquake? Or is Race from the Top live in enough situations to warrant its usage over Earthquake? I think that's the big question for this card. I could also see this being run in tandem with Earthquake as just a lot of removal. So I do think this is a solid card, and I do expect it to see experimentation for sure. I actually think that of all the Thunder cards, this is the only card that will see experimentation in Thunder Nexus. I don't think any of these really match up with Thunder Nexus, but I think that is a good thing because the deck's already good enough. I don't think it needed more support. So Thunder overall, I don't think is the worst support wave here. I think it is more tame. It's got some interesting stuff to test out. It's got some interesting ideas, and I do think that it being more middle of the road, maybe below average as a support wave, is more of a reflection on the set 1 support being as good as it is than necessarily this support being not that great. But now on to Wind, as you're hoping for, Keeps. We got a bunch of cards here. There's actually a lot of Wind cards this support wave. So Nemisail here is a Catarant clone and a Chautauqua clone, or I guess they're all clones of each other. Being able to return 2 Wind Spirits when it sees a Wind Spirit is phenomenal. Best receive effect, and it has some great applications with with Wind. I could see you just want to conserve Elestrals in hand, search this out with Aeolus, cast it out, you recover 2 spirits, you discharge it off Aeolus. Awesome. I think this also has interesting applications with Exaltair, though I don't know if it's the best use Nexus synergy there, because being able to bring your opponent 2, gain back 2, that's great spirit differential and really helps bolster you, but you do need to protect these small bodies on board. It might just be better to go with P-Gust for those Nexus synergies, but on top of that, it's just another option, which I think is great for Wind. It is the toolbox element, and it's also pretty expensive. Nemisail just fits in perfectly. I think it has great synergy with that element as well, and just gives it another way to also have Alter synergy, which is a really strong card. We needed Nemisail so much. Yeah, it really did. It really did. I love this little guy. Terrasail, its Ascension is also part water. 7 attack, can Nexus a Wind or Water Spirit, and when you do, you can specialize Nemisail from your hand or deck. That's actually, I think, a pretty decent effect, but I do think that it's not a bad card by any means. I just don't think it's overly powerful, and I think that's why it just won't see play. It's decent, but not really strong enough to see play. It doesn't do anything exceptional. Sure, you can recover some spirits. It's more Nexus synergy. Swarm the board. Its 7 attack's decent, but I feel like you want your 2 costs to just do more than this card does, and there really isn't much direct benefit to, I think, swarming the board with Nemisails right now. So for sealed formats, though, I do think this card is actually going to be pretty good. Like, if I'm rocking Wind and Water in the next ECL, I might want to try to make a Terrasail deck, because this sounds very, very interesting. Moving over to Findust here, it is a Wind Rune Searcher by a Disenchant, and that's really cool for Wind overall. I will say, though, I don't think there's anything that you really want to disenchant from this Findust to be able to search out right now. I don't think the Wind Runes are really strong enough right now, but if there is one that's just insanely powerful that you want to find it, that is worth giving up your normal cast or try to set up extra spirits on it, that'll be worth it, I think. And then if you've built your deck around 1 core Wind Rune, that you need to find, I guess same thing, you would want to find it and you can use this card. So really it just needs more powerful Wind Runes that are more just worth using this effect for, or a Wind Rune that you're building your deck around. It also has the ability to special send into a Hibufin for your hand deck if you cast Sandstorm. You do need to get an extra spirit on it, though, if you want to keep it on board for that. I do think that's the least interesting application of this effect, but still pretty cool for a fun deck here. Hibufin is a 7 attack again, and you can spend a Wind or Earth to change each of your opponent's Elestrals to defense position, and while this Hibufin is attack position, your opponent's defense position Elestrals are suppressed. This is another, I think, alright effect. Just being able to switch stuff to defense to more easily attack over it isn't too bad. Suppressing their effects is pretty good, but I think you really would, this sounds a bit better on a wider board. I think there isn't a lot of ways in Wind to really swarm the board without being able to protect it, in which case I think you just have better things to do anyway, like just set up Nexus. Cool effect though, and it is nice that you can ramp into it off of the Sandstorm. As we'll see with Sandstorm when I get to it, these cards are kind of at odds with each other, which is a bit interesting. So again, Hibufin, it's an alright card. I think it's honestly probably a little worse than the Terrasail, but a really cool. I think it's a cool card personally, just not very competitively viable. Nimbug, we're skipping over because we already know what it does. Charcoon, treated as Seercoon, but it's a fire, sort of a fire nexus form of the Seercoon. Kind of, I don't know what to classify this as. But during your draw phase, you can special send this Charcoon to Flame Off from your hand deck if you have at least 3 enchanting fire on your field. Just like all the effects that you have to wait a turn for them, I don't think this is very good. I think this is not that great of a card. That being said, though, Flame Off is a strong card, so if you can get this to stick, you are getting a really good payoff, and you can pretty easily get into this with the Nimbug. So I do think there is a place to be able to ramp into this quicker. It's definitely a bit better than like the Pangawap, but I still don't think it's a great bridge overall. I imagine that once Flame Off gets better ways, actually there might be better ways in the set to get into it, they will prefer going through that avenue than the Charcoon here. Flame Off, though, is a very strong card. Gain 1 plus 1 attack for each wind on your field. That's fine, 11 attack, but I don't think the attack really matters on 3 costs. But mainly, it's that when your opponent activates a rune effect, you expend 2 fire to negate that effect and destroy that rune. It will only activate once per turn. That makes this incredibly difficult to deal with. Your opponent needs to have 2 removal lined up or hope you just are out of fire spirits. Yeah, Briston is still just so bad. Yeah, it really is. Anything that requires you to wait a turn, I think is going to be pretty bad. Without any immediate impact, at least, is going to be pretty bad. But yeah, that's a very strong effect. So if you get this Flame Moth on board, it's going to do something most likely. The main challenge, I think, is just trying to get it out and make sure you have the fire in your spirit deck to be able to fuel it. And that's where I think Charcoon's also a bit awkward as a bridge, because you need the fire spirits on board. You need 2 extra fire spirits on top of the Charcoon to get into the Flame Moth, but you really want those spirits in your spirit deck to be able to use. So I feel like Flame Moth, just finding other avenues to get into it will be way better, but really strong effect. Cockatoodle, Cockatoodle. I always kept reading that as Cockatoodle. I'd like to say it was typed as Cockatoodle a lot of times why I have that in my brain. But anywho, Cockatoodle is a really neat card. I think it's a good card for attack. When it's cast, you're suppressing by Celestial and it remains suppressed as long as Cockatoodle is enchanted. I think it's just great for the element that likes to toolbox, because it's just a great utility effect overall. I think it pairs perfectly with Wind. Dracodoodle, Dissension is an interesting card. A lot of Wind Ascensions here. Being able to spend a Wind in order to suppress each Celestial on your opponent's field into the end phase. We've seen this effect a lot. That's more niche, but I like that there's payoff with this card, because when it destroys the suppressed Celestial, your opponent must expend 3. I think this is where this card differentiates from other suppressed stuff like Brontiglow, because you have a reason to suppress your opponent's Celestials outside of just like your opponent's got a Foamy on board you want to shut down. So I think it's a very interesting Ascension. I could see like a really cool deck that wants to build up into it to apply pressure to it. I don't think this will be the most meta version of Wind, but I think it'll be really fun and great for sealed events. Galaxair, I know Coder thinks this card is insane. I go back and forth on how powerful I think this card is going to be. Because in one regard, it can be viewed as a cheaper, a cheaper Sorlet, because you don't have to expend, but you're still getting the swap. Also, by swapping attack and defense as opposed to position also means that you can still pressure spirit damage if that's ever relevant. However, this is a very weak body, and if your opponent has 3 on any of their stats, this card doesn't really do anything. You do have the neat application of also being able to switch your own Elestral's attack and defense, but I don't think that will come up as much as switching your opponent's attack and defense. So at the end of the day, honestly, I think it will be an alright card. I could see it seeing some splash play as like additional Sorlets, but I just don't think it beats out Sorlet. That 5 attack is too good. Cocktail going to go hard versus Morfrost. It's a solid 9 out of 10. Yeah, I agree with that. For sure. Galaxair has a lot of uses outside of Wind as well, though. That is true. That is very true. I guess the question is, do you want to pair it outside of Wind? So I really haven't explored that option. That's a very good point, Graveshift. That definitely gives it a lot of additional utility that I'm curious to see how people can utilize it. I think the big thing, though, is it seems like you might want to establish something and then throw it down on board. But hey, maybe if you don't want to run the extra Wind Spirits for Sorlet to swap positions, Galaxair can be a good substitute for that, just a more lean engine. So yeah, I'm really curious what people come up with that. Really great point, Graveshift. Moving over to the runes, we got 2 here. Tower of Winds, Nexus a Wind to a Wind Enchanted Elestral, and if you do, special send it into Elestral from your hand. Really cool effect. That is true words. That's a very good point. I completely forgot about that. For going back to the Galaxy here, this, if you're in the Wind Mirror match, this is a really nice card. I could see siding out Sorlets for this card, and that's probably one of the other reasons why Coder probably thinks it's also so good, I would imagine. So yeah, that's a very good point. So I changed that. I think this is definitely a good card. You guys have brought up some great points I did not think about. But Tower Winds, really cool card here, being able to help you ascend into 2 and 3 costs because of how it works. It does require a lot of setup, but if you can get it off, there's some powerful 3 costs out there. Flammoth is the first one I'm looking at here. So, and you've got ways to search out pretty much every piece except the Ascensions right now. So I think that's a big thing that might hold back this card, is just the fact that you can't search out Ascensions right now, but once you can start searching out stuff, this can be really strong. Or I could see this even just enabling you wanting to run, I don't know, 3 Flammoth, 3 Pantera, you can easily just quickly ascend into a Tower of Winds. That could be viable. It's just a great enabler overall, so I'm excited to see what people come up with. I don't think there's anything right now that will make this meta viable, but it's going to be a super fun card to see experimented with. Sandstorm is an interesting pseudo removal card, because for each Earth Celestial that is not Earth Enchanted, return it over into hand if it's in defense position, otherwise change it to defense position. Until the end phase, those Celestials cannot change positions. Really cool effect here. The bounce effect I really like, and this is where it feels a bit counter to Hibufin here, because if you're going Findus and Hibufin, what you really want to do is you want to have Hibufin out, expend, switch all their Celestials to defense position, and then use Sandstorm to bounce them all back to hand. But if you're trying to use it to ascend, you're not really getting that. So that's a bit awkward here. So I can see this seeing niche play. I can see some decks really liking this effect depending on what they do. For right now, though, I don't think anything really sticks out, though. I think we might need some more defensive decks, though. You know where this will see play? I know I was trying to grab at something. I could see decks trying to do Tsunami, Sandstorm to just board wipe your opponent as just a last-ditch effort. I don't know if that would be super meta-relevant. Maybe as like a tech option, potentially. So I do think Sandstorm has some benefits. I just think over stuff like Earthquake, you really need to be bouncing back multiple Elestrals to really make this worth it. So I do think it has some potential. I think it is a alright card, but I do think it's more situational overall. So for Wind, I think it's a phenomenal support wave. We've got some great stuff, both in Powerhouses, Nemesail, Flammoth, Galaxair. Also some interesting, more Ascension ramp stuff for Tower of Winds, which we've seen a lot of Ascension ramp already in Wind, so that feels very on brand for it. And also just some interesting cards in general. I think the Kakatado, Dracodoodle are very interesting cards as well. So I think this, honestly, I think this is probably my favorite support wave from the set. I think it's the strongest support wave. And I mean, you can argue Frost, but I think saying that with it being his first support, you'd hope it'd be strong. But yeah, in terms of supporting the original 5 islands, I think this is the strongest support wave that we've gotten. Since this is dual typing, though, it'll be hard to tech the spirits if you're outside Wind and Earth. That is true. That is definitely true, but I don't know if it would be that difficult to maybe just throw in like an Earth and Wind Spirit. Or if you're running like Earthquake, maybe just throw in a Wind Spirit. And that's all you need. So I don't think... I can see your point if you're trying to build around it, but maybe it's like a tech option. I don't think it would actually be that difficult, though. And at least Earth is heavily played, and if Wind pops off, it'll be heavily played. So that's a neat option for it. So, yeah. Definitely not unfounded. I don't think it's for everything, hence why I say it. Like, I think it's a decent card, but not like an amazing card. All right, for the generic runes, Poison Nectar, we've already kind of gone over what it does, but kind of discuss how good I think it is. I think it's a phenomenal side deck option to keep powerful draw engines in check. Main thing from this set that I can see is Drataya and Aphros. So where I think this will be very interesting for those, obviously not a main deck card, but if the strategy is centered around those cards, siding in those just to punish it is going to be really, really good. And it's just a question of how prevalent are those decks in the meta to justify running Poison Nectar in your side deck. I think that's the big question there. On top of that, I think because of the existence of Poison Nectar, if Aphros draw or like an Aphros deck, focus deck, as well as a fruit focus deck, where I think what will happen is we'll see is what happens to Krakatuka Burn. It's going to probably have a really strong best of one showing, or Swiss showing because of the best of one format. But once you get to top cut, once people start signing those Poison Nectars, those decks probably will just crumble. So I'm happy this card exists to keep those in check, but so I think it's a decent card, but definitely very much a side deck option. The final card here is Divine Blessing. This card can only be cast if your opponent activates an Invoke rune. You can dischant one from your field in order to negate that rune. Very powerful. Though I will say, I don't know how many decks will really, especially meta decks, will really want this card right now. I think the decks that want this card are the ones that go tall, and that's very nice protection. Though there isn't any that I see right now that I think is going to be like just stand out amazing, at least from a meta context, that will definitely want to run this card. But for like casual play, this is amazing. But I do think this has future potential, especially as you get more powerful and defining Invoke runes. If your opponent's built around Invoke rune and you can just negate it, that will be devastating. And that'll make this card a good, at least a good side deck option as well. So I think this does have a lot of potential, and I don't think that potential is really actualized here. I think we might see the start of its potential overall. So those are only 2 generic cards, not much to say here, but I don't think we need a ton of generic cards. We want to see elemental cards over it for, I think, good set balance overall. But yeah, that is about it for this set. If any of y'all want to just talk about any other thoughts here, Divine Blessing underrated IMO. I think it's a valid as a main deck rune personally. I'll be interested to see if that is the case. I mean, it's very possible, like an Earth Beatdown, just to be able to flip up Divine Blessing to stop an Earthquake and keep your board established. I don't think that's unfounded. I'm just not overall convinced, just because it specifically, do you want to commit the deck slots to that and have it only work against specific cards? Because, I mean, Invoke runes, they make up they're not even the majority here. It's mostly counter runes and Elestrals. That's the only thing. Maybe as like a 1 or 2 of. I'm ready to be proven wrong, but that's kind of my thought process why I don't know if it will really see its full potential right now. Yeah. Oh yeah, if you're running Divine Rune, easy setup for this card. But yeah, overall my thoughts for Frostfall, I think it's a very solid second set. I think it introduces Frost very well. I think it gives very great support to all the elements. It's outside of probably Thunder, but again, that I feel like that's more a reflection on set 1 than this set here. And artwork is an improvement. I think this is just my conclusion. Very strong second showing for Elestrals overall, and I think is a great example of the growth this game has experienced. And I cannot wait to start opening this. Like, we've been in set 1 for so long. I cannot wait to just start playing the set 2 stuff. I think Paul actually might be a sneaky card. Hey, I could see that. I don't know. I don't think it will be meta, but I could definitely see it being a sneaky card. Think they're sleeping on it? I think we need more ways to benefit from modifying stats. That is my personal take on this card. But I definitely see some potential there, like you guys are mentioning. Yeah, I think that's about it for this set. So, some of you might not have been there when I mentioned it at the beginning of the stream, but I have the new Vanguard starter decks in, so I thought I'd transition over to opening them. And it's not so much to just chill Vanguard, because obviously this is meant to be an Elestral stream. The reason I want to do that is because I think this is a great talking point, especially I haven't talked about the new starter decks, because I have some thoughts on these that I think are great to discuss in general TCG context. Pair it with Platypulse? Hey, I'd love to see it. So let me get set up here. I'm going to switch off the screen back to webcam. And I need to get my camera set up and we can transition into that. So while I'm doing this transition, please feel free for you all to keep discussing your thoughts on everything on Frostfall. Very happy to keep reading through them. I guess this is a good question for you all while I get this set up. What deck are you most excited for coming out of Frostfall? I'd say for me, it's definitely the water stuff. Let's see. Ooh, I need to plug in my phone. Do not have my cord here. It's my backpack. No words is going to say fruit. Calling it now. Oh. Why do I have these? Oh, I know I had these in. I didn't need these in the entire time. what I am going to do is move the keyboard out of it. Go and play vegetables. Ah, gosh darn it. You foiled me. Flamoth and Shiverwar? Oh, that's pretty cool. I've been already building out some decks, some example deck lists. I'm hoping to do. Oh, what's that going on? Oh, I didn't do that. I've been building out some example deck lists or template deck lists. That's what I've been looking for Frostfall, to be able to make a video on that. I'm super excited for it. So excited for Lockagon Water Nexus, but Waswai is going to be so great. Oh yeah, that card looks very, very strong. It's just a big question on that consistency there, in my opinion. Let's move that over. All right, I'm going to switch to my desk view, but the camera will not be set up properly. So I have to center it off of this. So bear with me here while I get this properly set up. Ooh, actually, that was good enough. That was a pretty early try. There's no way Wasai doesn't top cut IMO. Hey, maybe. I mean, the payoff is definitely there. It's just, again, it's just the consistency for me. All right, so kind of, you guys can keep chiming off with the Elestral stuff while I get this set up. More than happy to keep engaging with this, but if you don't know, Cardfight Vanguard is a Bushiroad card game. It's my... Sorry, Dan, it's my favorite card game. Elestrals holds a very special place in my heart, but so does Vanguard here. So they just introduced 6 new trial decks to mark with their latest season, and I got a bunch of them. Hoping for Poison can make it definitely top tier. That's scary if that's the case. Like, that's all I'm going to say. If Poison can make Wasai top tier, that's definitely going to be very scary. Oh, the glares are very bad on some of these. But yeah, introduced 6 new ones, so plenty of options. And again, the reason I want to really open these on stream is because I've got opinions that I think are interesting to talk from a TCG standpoint, not so much a Vanguard standpoint. So even if you're not a fan of Vanguard, I definitely think there's going to be something here for us to discuss. So let's start with these. So starting here, they've got 6 nations. The first one here is Dragon Empire, themed around dragons. So this one is... Yep, startup trial deck, Dragon Empire. So if you like cool dragons, this one's for you. Hey, Baron, I want you to teach some Vanguard when I come back to the States. Hey, we don't even have to wait that long, Baron. I can queue us up on Tabletop Simulator. Easy. But for sure. Ooh, Graveship, your guess is on Artifact for Poison Tunic. We need to be marking these down. I want to see who gets it right. I guess that makes sense. Tunic is an item. But also, Nectar of the Gods is kind of an item as well. Would those SCs be a great way to jump in and try it? Yes. But not because I think they are a phenomenal starter product. Like, they're an alright starter product, but more so because literally any other starter product right now is not legal anymore because of an addition they made, which I'll go over here. So for starters, one thing I like about these is this is a deck box. So it comes in a deck box. I think this is great packaging practice right here. They released some of them, and I still use these boxes to this day. Not necessarily for deck boxes. Some of the decks I use them for deck boxes. So that's already a bonus, or that's already a plus there. Yeah, it'll be easier to kind of discuss these once I talk about them. So what these come with is you get your pre-constructed deck with all the cards you'll need. Vanguard runs with 50 card decks, though they have a secondary deck that's kind of similar to the Spirit deck, but not in the sense of that you have a secondary deck that helps enable you to play the game, and that consists of 5 cards. So it's 55 cards total. Also coming in here, they come with a pack of sleeves, so you can sleeve your deck right away. Now, I will say the reason they include these sleeves is a little frustrating because ideally a starter product is cheap and easy to pick up. Yeah, they come in the actual box. I really like that. That's probably the best part about this one. But cheap and easy to pick up. In Japan, because this is a Japanese card game, these were cheap and actually didn't come with sleeves. But the problem is they're printed over in Singapore. I'm pretty sure this is the reason why. Don't quote me on this. But they're printed over in Singapore, and I just don't think it made sense for them to port them over at like $5 to $7 or like $8. So they didn't want to, of course, jip you on value. So they added in sleeves to at least try to justify these. I think they're about $20 a piece. At least that's MSRP. So a bit more expensive, but if you're already used to like playing trading card games, I think this is fine. Like you'll want sleeves for it if you're used to it. They also come with, I know about those, counters to keep track of stuff, which is very nice. You can use dice. That's all right. First guides for some rules, and you do come with a playmat, which is very nice. Or you're beating Yu-Gi-Oh! There, if you know about that one. So very nice. It has a lot of information on the rules, the playmat to help you out, all the zones to kind of help you out, which is very, very nice. Nothing on the back, though. Yeah, it's definitely not bad, though. I think it's just a bit tough for people who are brand new to the product, or brand new to say, I don't think $25 is egregious at all. And also the nice thing is you don't have to buy multiples of these. You get exactly you get the place of the cards you need from this. That is another bonus, but there's an asterisk next to it, which I'll get into. Yeah, I definitely don't think it's the worst. It's just, as a Vanguard player, I think it's a bit of a harder pill to swallow when there were $5 start decks at one point, which really helped people get into the game. So it could be worse. I do agree. That's one more minor. So getting to the deck. So this Dragon Empire deck, the theme of Dragon Empire is removal. So removal, and in the Vanguard, instead of having like your 4 Elestrals, you have your one main guy called your Vanguard, and you'll eventually, this is a little blurry. There we go. We'll zoom in a bit. Let's do that. There we go. So Dragon Empire, the theme. Yeah. The theme for Dragon Empire is removal, as well as making your main guy, your Vanguard, as big and threatening as possible. And they do that a few ways. This one in particular gains extra power. It can deal extra damage and can remove one of your opponent's rear guards or their supporting cards. And it also can consistently search itself out, which is important for this game because there's a mechanic called Persona Ride that benefits you from replaying your main boss card here, just in the form of extra power and a card draw. And power is the attack stat of this. So this is a super solid card. And you, of course, get your play set, which is 4 copies, so there's only 2 here. The other 2 are probably... Oh, I know where the other 2 are. So 2 copies here, but I'll show you where it is. And then from here, you'll notice this card doesn't have an effect. And this is where these decks kind of... my main issue with these come in. So these cards have effects, and let's see if I can skip to the very end here. This card here. This is called the Energy Generator. It's pretty much a card that you put off to the side, and it generates you resources to be able to play your cards and effects, or really play your effects, is what it does. And it's because of this card, it's brand new in this, that you have to start with this product, or else every other one is not legal, because you have to run this card. Now, as for the main issue with this one, these 2 cards are the only ones that have effects in this entire deck. Everything else is vanillas. And the reason that's especially frustrating for me is not because I don't think it's a bad idea to play with vanilla cards to start out with. It helps you learn the basic flow of the game, the inherent mechanics. As you can see, there's a ton of symbols here. That does something, that means something. Where's an example? This value here means something. There's a lot going on. So I don't think it's a bad thing. The problem comes is once you play 1 or 2 games, you get the basic game flow down, you're ready to start learning effects. And you just can't. It takes away that agency the players have to be able to take that next step unless they're going to go and buy another product, or, well, I should back up. To go out and buy another product. And ideally, that's the new set that has actually a lot of these cards with actual effects on it. Like this card here, it's a vanilla in here, but it has actual effect in the booster set. So that's how you would get those cards. But the problem is, you now have to buy the booster set. And while if you get hooked, you probably are going to buy it anyway. I just don't think it feels very good to be required to buy it to get these. The second issue is, right now, the booster set is not available. This came out last Friday. The booster set doesn't come out until, not this Friday, but the following Friday. So there are 2 weeks where if you try to pick up this game, you just won't be able to get the effect cards. I just think that feels really bad. And while I think it's the concept of teaching the game with vanilla cards is not a bad one. It's personally how I taught my fiance the game. I don't think it should be forced on the players at all. I think it could easily say in the rulebook or on the playmat to encourage you to play without effects first. But other than that, I think the artwork is sick. Like, there's so many cards here I think look so freaking amazing. That's a reprint. Really looked through these yet. Oh, I was very wrong. There's 3 cards with effects. My bad. Got these here too. Still though, it doesn't defeat the purpose of what I was previously saying. But honestly, with you all here in chat, I want to hear your opinion on that. Like, what's your opinion on that? Do you like that? Do you think that's, like, I'm trying to go with that. What's your opinion on what I just said? Let's leave it there. Yes, it is awesome. I can pull out a couple other ones to show you like the artwork does. Full force. There's also a few other things like the energy generator. Think of memory like Digimon. Yeah, every card is full art. I really like that about this game as well. So to track your energy, what's really frustrating is rules dictate you cannot use a dice. You have to use this or individual cards that come in the set. I think that is a very stupid ruling. Let players use dice. But the reason there's only 2 of them, there is 4 of them. As we'll see, there's 1, there's 2. So there's your 4. It's because you got these numbers on them to help with the rules and to follow along. I haven't kept track of what they are, but that's pretty much why they're there. So you can see all these have like numbers on them to help guide you through the game and teach you what each of these cards do in the context of the game. What are these? Oh, they're at the back. So the other cool thing about this is, so you get 2 bonus cards. So these are not part of your 55 card deck. So these are to start giving you a taste of what's to come. So in here, these 2 cards accomplish the same thing. They completely stop an attack. The difference is this one's a bit better than this one in effect at the cost of some attack price. It only got 6,000 versus 7,000. The difference is to use this card, you have to discard a card, which is fine. If you're stopping an attack, that's totally worth it. While this one, if you're at 2 or less cards in hand, or sorry, if you're at 1 or no cards in hand, you can use this for free. So it's like this one discards as part of the effect. So if you don't have any cards, you don't have to do this. This one discards for cost, meaning you have to use the effect. And then this is one of the core features of this game is triggers. And this one has an effect, so it's a bit better. You can see here you got the symbol up here. It's a front trigger. I'm not really going to go too much into it in this stream. Not relevant here. You see this one has a front trigger. This one's just reminder text. That one's an actual effect that is relevant for the game. So that's really nice that you get at least a taste. And these are 2 crucial cards for the game. These are staples, so that's very nice. So all in all, some gripes about this, but overall a cool deck. And the nice thing is you get support for this in the first set as well, so you can kind of keep playing it, but you can also easily branch off into other decks from the set. My opinion is the same. They should make you bridge into other product. Should make you fully learn how to play again. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. You shouldn't be forced into another product to fully learn the game. I agree with that. The idea should, in my opinion, the idea should be because you enjoyed learning the game, you go and buy more product. Like, that should be the incentive here. Now, that being said, I don't know this for sure, but I would like to think that Bushiroad wasn't doing that thinking, oh yeah, now they have to go buy product. I know one of the struggle points for Vanguard is that it has increasingly gotten more complicated and difficult to get into over the years. So I don't think it's completely unfound, especially hearing stuff about like the Japanese culture and card game culture, and then wanting to get in little kids, that might be their thought process is this is easier for little kids. So that's why they did it. All right, so next up here, I kind of ignored the box. You also get this cool artwork here with it. Looks awesome. You have it on the back. I really appreciate that. What is it called? Roaring Thunder Dragon, Triumphant Dragon. So this one is for the Dark States one. So this is more demon themed and ghost themed, which is pretty cool. So you got the sleeves. Those look amazing. I love sleeves, so I'm not mad about getting these. But as for the deck itself, and I'll go through these a bit quicker, just kind of show off the artwork, since that's really all that's left for this. So Dark States has a theme of building up one of its resources called Soul, and either converting that soul into advantage or more resources, such as cards, or building up a soul and effects trigger based on a number of cards I have in soul. This card in particular lets you use your soul as a toolbox to call out different cards, Call is playing them, to be able to pretty much get more out on board. This one uses it to get additional attacks out specifically. So cool effect. It's one of the stronger ones for sure. First time really looking through a lot of these artworks. Look amazing. That's a really cool looking one. This one's an old one. Funny enough, this has an effect version of it, but it's not in the main set because it's from the previous set of starter decks. Got our perfect guards here to block attacks. Triggers which are crucial for the game. And you got your numbered cards. I do like the touch of using the blue for it. Let's see. Now, let's see what I get here. Aren't they? So, all right, so there's a chance. So normally, this one's a pretty standard one. You get one effect trigger, and then you have one PG, but there's a chance you get a special one, and I hope to get at least one of them because every deck is pretty much running one of them if they can. And it's a one-of card. And they were locked behind the previous starter decks, or really these are starter decks. The previous ones were called trial decks. They're locked behind trial decks, which made them stupidly expensive if you didn't pick up those starter decks or trial decks. So it's nice to have another chance at getting them. It's a shame that they aren't guaranteed. There really needs to be a guaranteed printing of it. So let's see. Nope. Though that's a nice one. Actually, Front here for this one's good. The Front's played in a lot of decks. I use it a lot. Crit Trigger's probably the best generic one to get. Though funny enough, I feel like I'm running it less just because if you see here, standard triggers with no effect have 5,000 power. This one has 4,000 power. These don't normally come up, so a lot of times the utility effect is a bit better because the power doesn't matter. But in some instances, if you're just trying to close out a game, you just want to play these down, and 5k can sometimes make better numbers than 4k because this game operates off of increments of 5k. So for example, this guy's a 13k, and usually the opponent's going to be 13k. You want to hit 18k is the next what they call magic number. And if you just have a 4k behind it, you're not hitting that 18k. That's why it's usually run. All right. Ooh, we're already after 10 o'clock. Try to wrap this up. Hey, Luck. Happy you could hop in. Just open up the Vanguard new trial decks. If you come to the card shop on Sunday, I think I mentioned that to you, could definitely teach you the game. So this one's a robot. This one's Brantgate. This one seemed around like robots and aliens. This one particularly being a robot. Sleeves look awesome. Oop, let's throw that over there. Got the artwork in there. I'm a sucker for robots. This one is good. Unfortunately, it doesn't receive the best support, so it's not the most playable. Though I do love the artwork here. Also love that this here Blitz Gigamobile Asterm, the Blitz part, that's a reference to another deck in the game, and the theme of the deck is that it's a CEO and all of his inventions. So this is one of the inventions, which is pretty cool. So this card here, Brandgate does a bunch of different stuff, and it's a bit hard to explain. Normally they revolve around a card called Set Orders, but to make this not very complicated, they didn't include any in this deck. Nor does this require Set Orders. Instead, what it focuses on is something that Brandgate usually does a lot, and that's to be able to get multiple attacks out by reactivating or standing one of your supporting guys. So that's Gundam. Yeah, it's literally directly inspired by Gundam. There's a ton of it in Vanguard, mechas in Vanguard that are inspired by different mecha genres such as Gundam, and I love the look of it. But yeah, this one, that's one of the things Brandgate likes to do is just kind of restand their supporting guys to just get in multiple attacks. Sounds broken coming from Elestrals. In this game, it is very strong, but definitely not as broken as it would be. Like if you can think how strong Blazerus is. Imagine if you had a 1 cost that could do that. Strong, but probably not that strong. So as you can see here, we got 4 aliens. Definitely leans more into the waifu artwork. This one's a human, yeah. The operators for the mechas. Have more like cyber, what is the word I'm looking for? Androids? Yeah, android themed cards like this one. Dogs. More aliens. Got the perfect guards. Triggers. And these are all like Blitz pilots, so this would be like the pilot of the mecha potentially. Blitz designer, so like the designer of the mecha. Blitz sales cleave, so like since it's a company, it's the salesperson. Blitz doctor, kind of goofy, it's a little squirrel. Yeah, I love this artwork. Unfortunately, a lot of these cards, they're decent, but they're some of them are truly pack filler, and it's so sad when you've got such amazing artwork such as this. Oh, this one's not pack filler. This is needed for the deck. Right, that's the start here, Blitz Mechanic. So yeah, let's see. Let's get to these cards. Can I hit? It's called Elementaria Sanctitude, the one I want. Nope. Another front trigger. That's pretty good for rank 8. There's no missing on these triggers here. So there's a front draw or critical trigger. There's also heal triggers, but those ones are special effect triggers. All right, 3 more to go. So I'll probably go through these, try to go through these a bit quicker because my voice is given out. So Keter Sanctuary is full of knights and angels. It's considered the more holy nation. And they've got a few themes going for it. Sensory overload. So Lindsay agrees with that opinion. So it's such hit or miss when you talk to people. Some people say it's too much, it's sensory overload. Other people will love it because of all the intricacies. I love the intricacies. I don't love the border for that one. Really just comes down to personal preference. So this Keter Sanctuary deck in particular is themed around this angel here who can pretty much revive your allies to get additional attacks. That is the theme of this one. You see more dragons, like holy dragons, mages, knights. That's the general theme of this. I love this critical trigger. Just cute little, like you're just like, put down the knife. More angels, more knights. This one's a sylph. So number cards. We've already gotten through all this. Oh, we didn't go through our line. Angel supporting it. Where is it? Okay. So I was checking something up for myself. All right. Come on, Elementaria Sanctitude. Let's see it. Nope. I really like the artwork though on this one. And the front trigger, that's a really good one. I definitely need more front triggers. Yep, plenty of mages. I'll actually pull out that deck. It should be easily accessed, just kind of show you the extent of what Vanguard can offer, because I do have one sorceress deck. Is this one again? Okay. All right, 2 more to go. So this next one, Stoicheia, is one of my personal favorites. So this Stoicheia is themed around it's nature. So you've got the marine water theme, you've got an undead underwater theme, you've got beasts, but it also includes, oh, what did they include? That includes it. Also have like bugs, a whole bunch of stuff here combined into this. There's one more I'm forgetting. Oh yes, plant ladies. So like dryads. Cool sleeves there. And let's see. So this guy here, yep, water themed. So this guy here, unfortunately, is probably the weakest of the bunch, though it looks the coolest. I was tempted to build it, but if I'm going to take my time testing all the decks, it honestly has to be other ones. So I think I went for the binder. So this card lets you revive 2 supporting guys from your underworld. In this game, it's called your drop zone, which is great value. You just get to revive 2. Really, though, the problem is, as you can see, 3 of them so far give you additional attacks. and that is generally more valuable than just raw card advantage in that form. So it's a good value effect, but unfortunately, extra attack is just more valuable than just a straight up value effect. But with some support, if it can revive cards that can give you multiple attacks, then it gets pretty good. Which is really the support. It has a card in the first set that does that, but I think it needs more than just that. Yeah, you get to see this one combines a whole bunch of different themes from older Vanguard stuff. So you've got like water dragon, got an elf, a mermaid, insect, nature dragon. This one is call it Bioroid, so just more plant themed. I don't think I need to say anything else. Peppery pepper. Got a rabbit guy. Poetic Maiden Saphira, so you can see some maiden stuff. More elves. And then this one's silly. Variety Feast Dragon. This one's... So, God, I forgot about this. This one's so out of character for the progression, because these 4 cards you would go into itself. So you start with this squid demon thing, which doesn't match at all, to this little fairy here, to a fruit dragon, which, like, these two somewhat connect. And then you go into Sea General. It's too funny. Oh, I completely forgot the back cards. I'm guessing I missed the first impressions. Yes, you did. It went well. A lot of great responses from everyone here in chat. Nope. No Elementary Sanctitude. Draw trigger's good, though. First draw trigger I've gotten. Is this... I meant to check. Oop. No, it's not. There's an archetype from that set that checks for specific name. I was wondering, because visually it looks like it would match, but it does not have the name. And finally, Lyrical Monasterio. This one's been an interesting one because Lyrical has not been in the main sets up until the first set coming out in about 2 weeks. They've been pushed to their own side set. They're mostly like mermaid school. Well, they've historically been a mermaid theme, but these are more like school themed, funny enough, and it's all female units. It's pretty much the waifu clan. Their nation is a good way to put it. But they finally decided that they should just incorporate with everything else, which I agree with. It's a smart move. So here, Love Call Marlene. I forget what this does. So, oh, right. So this one goes after a classic theme, which this deck is known for, and that is bouncing their supporting guys back to their hand to either use for other purposes, be able to replay them to get their effects off. In this case, this one bounces it back and then gets to play out one from hand to get additional attacks and additional value off of their effects. So it's pretty much just a bunch of waifu stuff. So you've got more. This one is Elf. We've got a Dragon Maid, or is it Dragon? Dragoroid is what it's called. And you can see they're all in the lore behind this. That's all you needed to say I'm in. So the lore behind this is that all these characters on these cards are attending a school on the back of a giant flying whale. It is pretty much that they threw a school on top of like one of the titans from Xenoblade 2. Oh yeah, I got that one. The text lines? What do you mean by they're insane? Don't quite follow. Got idols as well. A lot of times they'll show off idols. This is one I care about the least because I play decks from all these nations except this one. Pretty much what happened was they printed one generic card that was stupidly expensive, and I gave up trying to keep up with it because it was just not worth it. Because I don't love the themes there. I prefer the themes from all the other nations. Darn. No Elementary Sanctitude. Well, I've got 7 copies, which is fine. I just switched them between decks. Yeah, all right. Well, I'm going to go grab one of my decks, just kind of show off the true, like, this is, like, some of you were saying how not you much do you like the artwork. I'm going to show you off what the artwork at its peak looks like. All right, so this one is that's a lot of text. It is a lot of text when you're comparing it to Elestrals. It's nothing compared to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Vanguard has an expanded format called Premium. This is for Standard. There are some truly wall of text cards in that. So like the text would go up to like here where my pointer finger is. It's ridiculous. But so this is a deck I really like. The Sorceress deck centered around this card here, Hexa Orb Sorceress. This is one of their special prints. It's textured. You can see you get the true full art experience with this card. And the reason I have this deck is because this one utilizes really this card here. It's called a full frame rare. It's all shiny. I typically prefer these, the special prints, over the full framers, but they decided they were going to switch over to this. But I really wanted to build this deck because of this card here. It's Hexorb Aquamarine. You can read the name better here. And literally it's just because I'm a March birthday. My fiance is a March birthday. Aquamarine's the birthstone for March. And when I got her engagement ring, it's not actual aquamarine because it's not good stone for a ring, but it is moissanite imitating aquamarine. So like there's a bunch of stuff that aquamarines are important to my fiance and I thought, oh wait, a card that's called Aquamarine? Yes, please. I want to build the deck. Give me something, because she's got a bunch of jewelry with imitation aquamarines. But yeah, you can see an idea with some of the artwork here as well. This deck is themed around manipulating the top of your deck to hit those triggers to get any cards to then get bonus effects. But yeah, I think that's it. Frame right here. So that one's probably more tame. It gives you an idea about some of the artworks there. But what I really want to show you, I'll have to go back and get it, is how they do true full art cards. Because I love those cards. Let me go grab those. All right, found it. So this is probably my favorite deck in the entirety of Vanguard. Mysterious Rain Spiritualist Zorga. And this is the full art card they did, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. Love how this deck plays. And the coolest thing about this, I need to move some of these out of the way to be able to show this, but stack these up. Should be enough room. So you got your Zorga here. Spring card, the Black Tears Husk Dragon. Right? Very detailed and vibrant. And yeah, you can start to see it here. The artworks connect. You can see the tail coming in here. Well, that's not all. Rancor Chain, another support card, goes right here and connects. Then Dream Nibbling goes underneath. Here, let's see if I can scooch it up. And it keeps going. I'm not done yet. Let's see if I can find those real quick. Got Abyss Temptation and then Elegy Pixie. So these cards go here and here. You can see the connection between tail, and it forms a full art picture. When I saw that, this is from the first set of the standard reboot back in 2021. And when I saw this, I'm like, I have to have these. I love this, absolutely. And I was able to sell off cards to get them. So I'm very happy with this. It's also an upgrade, Zorga Masks. The FFR, had to get that one as well. I don't like it as much, but yeah. Love Vanguard art here. But yeah, I think that is about it. I'm getting pretty tired here, not gonna lie, because it is 10:25 for me. Been a long day. But thank you all for hanging out. This was a lot of fun. Just kind of in conclusion for the Vanguard thing, the big reason was I also wanted to bring it up was because I think it was a great discussion about starter products, because I think it really highlights something Elestrals does right with their starter products. And even though, ooh, this deck, I just realized I need to change it up. But even though I don't like while the starter product definitely is a bit more on the expensive side, I think the booster packs are a great addition, and they just kind of navigated the whole price versus value and how to at least give players agency when learning the game so much better than these Vanguard decks did. I absolutely love this game, but I definitely would say that these starter products leave some to be desired, even if I understand what the design was. So just an interesting conversation here. But yeah, again, I know you're asking if you're to try out Vanguard, you do kind of need to pick one of these up specifically for this energy generator. And honestly, if you're going to wait, I'd probably say wait until like not this Friday, but the following Friday, just so you also have the main set out. If you get hooked and want to buy more, you can easily get access to it right away. But enough about Vanguard. Thank you all for hanging out. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed discussing Frostfall with everyone here. Yeah, thanks, Keebs. But yeah, I'm going to get out of here. No long drawn out stuff. Look forward to more streams. It's very much more doable for me right now while my life is a bit hectic with... I'm going to be moving very soon, so definitely I expect more streams than videos as of right now. Shattered Stars month 4 should be coming up pretty soon. Hopefully Frostfall, and I look forward to it. Okay, caught my last chat messages. Initial 3 booster packs and SD was amazing upgrade. Agreed. Just tell me which one of the strongest and I'll get it. Okay, I can do that, look. No problem at all. And yeah. I mean, if any of you are ever interested in learning Vanguard just to kind of expand your breadth of games, you can just message me, Tabletop Simulator. I can easily get stuff set up. I know Larry's mentioned it, but yeah. Enough dragging it out. I'm terrible at ending these streams. So I look forward to streaming and seeing you all in more streams coming out real soon. Hopefully, maybe even do some gaming streams. We'll see. Once I move, everything should calm down as well. But yeah, thank you all for hanging out.